Good evening from Heathrow. It's 6 o'clock. Coming up on ITV1, an hour of coverage on an extraordinary day. Police say they have disrupted a plot to blow up planes in mid-air. Were we on the verge of our own 9/11? There is chaos at airports as security has stepped up to never-before-seen levels. And police raid homes in London and High Wycombe.
Airport chaos. Passengers queue hours for flights that have been delayed or even cancelled.
Across East London and here in Buckinghamshire, homes are raided, unknown numbers of people arrested and homes evacuated.
We investigate the increasingly devious methods employed by would-be bombers to sneak explosives on board planes.
Good evening. The plan was to commit mass murder on an unimaginable scale. The plot, we're told, was to carry bombs onto transatlantic flights, blowing the planes up in mid-air. That plan has been disrupted tonight, but security services clearly believe there may still be bombers on the loose, as unprecedented checks have been put in place at airports like this one, with almost no hand luggage being allowed on planes. That is causing massive disruption. Tonight, the full story. Police say the plot was to bomb flights from the United Kingdom to the United States. Explosives would have been smuggled on board planes and blown up in flight. Simon Harris has the full story and reaction coming up. There have been numerous raids and 25 arrests overnight, most of them in London. Details are still unfolding tonight. We're live with the latest on the police operation. The MI5 lists the current threat level as critical. That means an attack is expected imminently. The alert has led to unprecedented security being put in place for those travelling by plane, causing extraordinary disruption. We've got the story from all of our airports tonight. It was just before 6 o'clock this morning, as the first passengers were arriving here at Heathrow for early morning flights, that the story began to emerge. Security was suddenly at an extraordinary level. Flights were being delayed, and very quickly the full details became clear. A mass murder plot. British citizens planning to blow up planes in mid-air. So let's begin our coverage then with Simon Harris, who reports on a plot to commit mass murder.
Put simply, this was intended to be mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
The words of one of London's top police officers at the start of an extraordinary day in the capital. It began with police raids, a series of arrests, and then an unprecedented security crackdown at London's airports. For tens of thousands of airline passengers, this was the first they knew about it. Airport chaos. Holidaymakers and business travellers alike were caught up in a huge logjam at check-in desks. This was Gatwick, as airport workers struggled to implement the new security checks.
We've been here 3 hours, we're going to Italy. We spent 2 hours in a queue, which all the BA staff told us was the right one. Then when we got to the front, they told us it was the wrong one.
It's just really annoying just not knowing what's going on, because I don't know if my flight's been cancelled or not yet.
We're not really sure if our flight's cancelled or not, because he doesn't even know. He doesn't work for EasyJet, and he's just a spokesman who's just got a speaker, and he hasn't got a clue.
Heathrow was the hardest hit, with more than 600 flights cancelled by mid-afternoon. The terrorists' targets were said to be transatlantic flights, making this their most likely departure point. All hand baggage was banned, and what was allowed on planes amounted to very little.
Tissues and handkerchiefs must be unboxed, and keys will be allowed, but not with electrical key fobs. All passengers must be hand-searched, and their footwear and all items they are carrying must be X-ray screened.
At 2 o'clock this morning, the Joint Intelligence Analysis Centre, or JTAC, held an emergency meeting. The threat level facing Britain was increased to critical, the highest alert. The authorities decided to act after a massive surveillance operation and a tip-off from abroad.
We have been looking at meetings, movements, travel, spending, and the aspirations of a large group of people.
Anti-terrorist police officers raided several addresses, at least 2 in Walthamstow in East London, and by early morning 21 people were under arrest. But the main focus of police attention was High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire, where a number of properties are being searched.
We are confident that we have disrupted a plan by terrorists to cause untold death and destruction and to commit, quite frankly, mass murder.
Whilst the police are confident that the main players have been accounted for, neither they nor the government are in any way complacent.
Few precise details of the plot have emerged, but it's said to have involved US airlines, perhaps as many as 9 jet airliners, flown from Heathrow and blown up over 5 US cities. An attack that was apparently imminent and could have killed thousands. Simon Harris, London Tonight.
So a terrorist atrocity averted, but we're told chaos and misery nevertheless for hundreds of thousands of travellers, many families with young children hoping to just jet off for their hard-earned summer breaks. Well, similar scenes have been mirrored at airports around the region. John Gilbert now on how passengers have been coping on this day of uncertainty and disruption.
A human nightmare in a teeming vortex called Gatwick. Fleeing the stresses of London, thousands of holiday makers instead today found themselves swept up in chaos. Flights cancelled, information scarce, elbow room scarcer still.
Well, it's a shock, because I didn't know until I was on the way to the airport. And my daughter rang me, so I was really in shock.
We're fine about it, as you know, the security's fine. We've just been queuing up for quite a while, but apart from that, we're going on holiday.
What needs to be done has to be done. So if we have to wait, we have to wait. We know they're doing the right thing.
Those passengers with a hope of flying diligently observed security instructions, leaving travel documents and medication clear to see. But faced with hundreds of cancellations, others could only look on in despair.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now calling the BA 179 to JFK and the 129 to Islamabad. If you can go into the terminal building now, please. Thank you.
A rare outbound flight from Heathrow, but London's biggest airport was worst hit of all. As armed police patrolled, dismayed passengers discovered European and other short-haul flights cancelled across the board, once basic human comfort swept away.
Now, just a few hours ago, the terminal building here became so crowded and congested that all these passengers you see here were asked to step back outside the building again and queue once again. Now, many of these people I've been speaking with have already had their flights cancelled, and they're simply hanging around in the hope that they can get themselves onto a later scheduled flight. And even those passengers whose flights remain valid have no idea when, where, or even if their planes are likely to take off.
It's been pretty bad from traffic coming up here. There was congestion on the way, and we got here, we were told to wait outside until they call us in. So we don't know when they are going to call us in.
Flights have been cancelled. It was cancelled already this morning, and I'm just basically waiting to see if I can get to Canada tomorrow, tonight, anything via anywhere.
Disheartening, but I don't know. It hasn't really set in yet. I'm just still I don't know, kind of in shock that this is what's going on with my 2-week vacation.
At Stansted to the northeast, by now familiar scenes. Budget carriers like EasyJet and Ryanair took no chances, cancelling over 600 flights between them. And though London's smaller airports, Luton and City, themselves appeared to escape the worst, industry experts advised passengers to take nothing for granted.
Anybody intending to fly tomorrow and over the weekend should arrive at the airport prepared. This means arriving with no hand luggage, bringing those items allowed into the cabin in a clear plastic bag, and being prepared for delays.
With tomorrow's position still unclear, many passengers are expected to spend tonight at airports, reminders of the causes of the chaos ever present to their eyes. John Gilbert, London Tonight.
Well, tonight there is what police are calling a significant number of people under arrest after they raided houses at various addresses around the capital. The massive, coordinated swoop centred on addresses in High Wycombe, Hackney, Haringey, Waltham Forest, Barking and Dagenham and Tower Hamlets. Those held are believed to be young, British-born Muslims. Liz Wickham reports now on the police operation.
There have been several raids here in High Wycombe, the first at Walton Drive, where 9 properties have now been evacuated. The raid took place in the early hours of this morning, where we hear that 2 brothers in their late 20s or early 30s were living with their wives and children. Both young men are Muslim, who until a few years ago worshipped at one of the moderate mosques in High Wycombe. A few years ago they began to attend a breakaway mosque and took to growing beards and their wives wearing burqas. Some local people knew them for many years.
He's older than me, like in the late 20s, early 30s, and they used to be out and about playing football and that, but we just don't see them no more.
Later in the morning, we're told, a house on Micklefield Road was raided, where 3 young men in their 20s or 30s lived with their parents. We also believe that the family owned a house just across the road. It's all closed up, but cars are often seen coming and going. This afternoon, police have moved into Woodland, here off Forest Way. And we have heard rumours, only rumours at this stage, that an incendiary device has been found there. Meanwhile, in Walthamstow in East London, a house in Forest Road was raided by police, also in the early hours of this morning. They targeted a top flat, which had recently been sold. Doreen Cardy, who's lived next door for 30 years, heard nothing.
Yeah, so I never heard anybody.
You mentioned to me a sort of drilling sound.
It woke me up about 5 o'clock this morning. I just heard a drill. I thought it would be drilling, but I don't know if it was coming from there. I don't know. I can't tell you.
Later this afternoon, we've had reports of another raid in Folkestone Road, also in Walthamstow, as yet unconfirmed.
Well, it is an ongoing story, and police involved in that operation have been giving more details within the last few minutes. So let's go straight to Liz for the details on that. Liz.
Yes, Alistair, I'm on Walton Drive in High Wycombe, where, as you can see, there's still a big police presence, as there is in all the streets around here that I mentioned to you in that package. Also, of course, police presence in the nearby forest land. We've just heard from police that the address at Micklefield Road, which I mentioned, has actually been vacated for the last 5 days. The family just moved out. Is that significant? We don't actually know. We, as yet, don't have confirmation about that incendiary device I mentioned in the Kingswood Forest. Now, the Kingswood Forest is just off junction 4 of the M40. There's still a big police presence there, forensic officers and search officers. We've also have not been able to confirm a rumour that there's been a no-fly zone above that junction of the M40 all afternoon. We're trying to get confirmation of that. In a press conference given by Superintendent Mike Ismay of Thames Valley Police, he was definitely keeping his cards very close to his chest this afternoon.
At this stage, there is no direct intelligence to suggest that the threat to people living in Wycombe is any greater than normal, although we would urge members of the public to be vigilant and to report any suspicious activity direct to the police.
Well, Superintendent Ismay there, very anxious to reassure local people here in the High Wycombe area. But as you know, there is activity right across the Midlands and London and here, and I'm sure it will be going on well into the night, and we will be obviously updating you on ITN News as things come in. Back to you, Alistair.
Liz, thanks very much indeed. So that's the detail of that ongoing police investigation, but what has emerged throughout today is a pretty clear picture of what the terrorists were apparently planning to do. Bombs in several parts, possibly liquid explosives, and disguised as everyday objects would have been smuggled on board in hand luggage. They would then have been assembled on the plane and exploded. The sole aim to bring that airliner down. Glenn Goodman looks at the possibilities and realities of the explosives plot.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. At Heathrow, passengers can now take little more than their essential documents into the cabin.
All passengers must be hand-searched, and their footwear and all items they are carrying must be X-ray screened. Any liquids discovered must be removed from the passenger. We will not be permitting bottled liquids and fluids.
Is this degree of caution justified by the risks, or is it excessive?
You may be wondering why they need to ban food and drink from aircraft, considering that these days we have sniffer dogs and sophisticated electronic devices that can detect explosives inside containers before you get on the aircraft.
The problem is that the terrorists are now one step ahead. Instead of bringing on explosive compounds and mixtures onto the aircraft, they can now bring on completely harmless substances that may look like apple juice, for example, or look like the powder inside these sweets, and on their own, these substances are harmless and undetectable. But when they take them into the aircraft toilet and mix them together, then they get a volatile, explosive compound. All they need then is a detonator to set them off, which could be hidden inside a mobile phone, or indeed, as they have done in the past, inside a Casio watch like this one. Convicted bomber Ramzi Youssef is believed to have pioneered the liquid techniques and the use of a Casio watch more than a decade ago. It's believed he may have passed his methods on to his followers. So if explosives can be disguised in such devious ways, how do we make our aircraft safe?
This is all a question of balanced risk. I mean, you could say that we should all board aircraft naked with no luggage and then we'd all be safer. Well, perhaps that would be true, but it's not practical. I think there is a specific and real danger from bringing liquids such as soft drinks, perfumes, that sort of thing, on board aircraft, and I think we can do something about that, and I think we should do something about that, specifically because we know the terrorists have been planning to use these liquid explosive compounds.
Another major advantage would-be terrorists have is that it's relatively easy to damage an aircraft.
Being a high-pressure system in a low-pressure environment, up high there, it requires relatively less material to cause a potentially catastrophic explosion. So you're talking an aerosol shaving foam container-sized device would represent quite a serious threat to an aircraft.
So it's a game of one-upmanship between the terrorists and the security experts. All our side can do is try to second-guess what their next move will be. Glenn Goodman, London Tonight.
So a day of the normal and the abnormal. There, a picture of a family just getting ready to go on holiday. Big bags, a daughter having a quick last drink of water. But look at the plastic bags there. These are the extraordinary scenes at airports that have been caused by the unprecedented level of security. Now, at the heart of this, as Glenn was just talking about, was the terrorist plan to carry components for bombs onto planes and then blow them up in midair. So almost all hand luggage has been banned from flights. That's why they've got their plastic bags. Nothing is allowed in your pocket. What you can take on board, and Craig here, my floor manager, is going to help me with it, is a simple plastic bag like this. It's got to be a see-through plastic bag. Now, in it, you can put a small wallet that's got a bit of money and a few credit cards in it. You can, of course, there are the credit cards, thanks, Craig. You can also put your travel documents and your passport into it. As far as medicines are concerned, prescription drugs like these are OK, a couple of little bottles of pills there, but only enough for the journey. Spectacles, and this is an interesting one, you can take the glasses with you, but you can't take the case. That is not allowed. Contact lenses we've got there as well. They're OK. But again, remember what Glenn was just saying, not the fluid to clean them up and keep them fresh, because the police don't know what might be in there. It may not be all in one, clean your lenses up. So that can't come. Keys are OK, but not if they've got one of these little attachments, an electronic opening button. So the keys would have been OK, but because of that, no, they have to stay behind. For the women and for the babies, enough sanitary and baby products for the journey, so they're OK. But milk products, like this one here, have to be tasted in front of security staff to prove that it is what it claims to be. Again, it's fluids. You cannot take anything else. No handbags, no books, no magazines, and your shoes will have to be x-rayed. So a little demonstration there of what it's all about. With me now is an old friend of London Tonight, ex-Flying Squad boss John O'Connor. John, just step in here with me for a moment. That wasn't supposed to be a bit of fun, but it was just a way of demonstrating what these good folk here are facing. This is a very serious day.
Yes, it is, and the disruption to these people who, save for their holidays, going on their holidays and so on, you can't but admire their courage, really, because they're going to be flying in the face of a critical alert, which means an attack could be imminent. So,
sure.
And if you look at how carefree they are about it. It's quite remarkable.
Now, the airport authorities, BAA here and British Airways, for example, here at Terminal 4, they got the first word 2, 3 o'clock this morning. The Home Secretary went on telly 5, 6 o'clock. It's still going on, as Liz Wickham was just explaining. This is very much an ongoing police operation, however many people have been arrested.
That's it, that's right. Because, as you'd always say on the Flying Squad, you know, the prisoner in the charge room is your stepping stone to your next prisoner. This is the start of it. They've got the interrogations to go through, they've got all the documents, probably computer databases to go through. They need to get the linking factors to link all the people that have been arrested into a conspiracy. They need to get people perhaps that might roll over and become witnesses. So there's an ongoing huge investigation. And of course the big worry of it all is one doesn't know whether this is the tip of the iceberg. How many more people are there involved in this? How many more people, maybe not prepared to become terrorists, but now maybe will move up and will become terrorists? It's a very, very worrying scenario.
I tell you the other thing that's going to be worrying people tonight, and you know me well enough to know I am not a cynical journalist, but I'm a cautious journalist. When you and I last chatted live on this programme, we were at Forest Gate.
Yes, we were.
We thought then it was the big one. It unravelled in a pretty spectacular way. How confident are you that this is a big one?
Well, I think this is different. I think with Forest Gate, it was all or nothing. They either found the product when they went in and they had a case, or they didn't, and they didn't find the product, they didn't have a case. I suspect after months of surveillance and months of operations that this has been attending to this, I've no doubt that they've got enough evidence already, whether they find the products or whether they don't. So it's not all going to be relying on what's come out of the searches. They've gone in with evidence, I'm quite sure of that. Otherwise we wouldn't have got the reaction we're now getting. We wouldn't get this high level of security.
In a nutshell, these may be frustrated people, but they're damn lucky people.
Well, I suppose they are, because if you're talking about upwards of 6 aircraft being brought down, you know, that's bigger than 9/11. That's going to be it would have been a horrible scenario.
John O'Connor, good to see you. Thanks for joining us this evening. Well, here at Heathrow, we have witnessed chaotic scenes all day. Across London, about 40 miles away from here, is the capital's second airport, Gatwick, and it is a similar picture there. Chris Rogers is there live for us tonight. Chris.
Alistair, the latest here is that there are now 3 security checks in place for all passengers flying to the United States. The last check is on passengers as they actually board the plane. There are severe delays tonight, and the advice is to contact your airline before you get here. Until now, 135 flights were cancelled out of 800. By the end of the day, 120,000 passengers would have descended on Gatwick, all of them glad to be safe, many clearly frustrated.
Honestly, I reckon that this is one of the safer days to fly because of the extra security in place. It's a pain to have to stand here, but in the end of the day, it is safer.
I've been queuing for an hour. I'm going to Raleigh in USA, and if it has to be done, it has to be done. I'd much rather they do that than there be any terrorism or anything, and know that my flight's safe.
It's like 7 o'clock this morning when we found out, obviously, everything was packed, and then we've had to sort of unpack everything and start again, and we don't know. We've got to taste the milk and taste the food and everything. I mean, she's got little tins of food.
Not allowed
You know,
to take
how
them
you,
on.
and they've now said that we'll probably have to pack them or not take them.
Well, the latest airline to cancel its flights is EasyJet. They hope to resume their services from tomorrow morning. There are many passengers stranded here at Gatwick tonight, getting connecting flights or about to go on their holidays, and 2 of them join me now, Hank and Sherin Leotard. You were en route to the United States, and now you're stranded in London. An horrific day for you.
Oh, it's awful. 3 hours in line and delay after delay. Came here and told we had to get a room and come back tomorrow.
And one of the many complaints that I've been receiving from passengers is the lack of information about what's been going on today.
Right, we really didn't know. We were told we could only carry a wallet and a passport, and told there was a bomb threat in London. That's all we knew.
And you've been looking for accommodation and a way to get home today. How much
Yes.
help have you had with that?
No help. They told us we were on our own.
Hank, your country, America, and our country were the targets of today's alleged plot. You've got to get your flight home. How do you feel at the moment about that?
Well, I was a bit bothered at first, but taking the security measures they've taken to make sure that everybody was going to be safe, I'm not bothered at all. I'm happy about the way they took care of things.
Are you scared to get on a plane tomorrow?
No, somebody told me that the security's so tight that nobody can get in. So I'm not afraid to fly tomorrow.
There is a huge British resilience here in the face of terrorism. Is it very much the same for Americans as it is for Londoners?
Yeah, anything they do to get these guys, we're behind them 100%.
OK, well, I understand you've got a room tonight, so I hope you have a good night's sleep and you get home tomorrow. However, many passengers are sleeping on the floor of both the South and North Terminal in Gatwick tonight, unable to get to their destinations. Again, the advice is to contact your airline before travelling this evening.
Chris, thanks very much indeed. OK, more from here at Heathrow in just a moment, but first, Chrissy with the weather.
London weather, sponsored by Tops Tiles. Brightening homes, whatever the weather.
Good evening. There might be a few showers to the east of London late tomorrow, but I think for the most part it is going to stay dry. Any showers will clear this evening, dry and clear skies tonight, fairly light winds, temperatures not too bad, as you can see, lows of around 12 or 13 Celsius. A decent start tomorrow morning, dry, some sunshine, some cloud, but with a weak weather front sitting very much to the east of London throughout the later part of the afternoon and into the evening. As you can see, there will be some light showers coming in, but further west, certainly staying dry. Again, some pleasant sunshine throughout the afternoon, light winds and temperatures a little bit cooler than today, highs of 21 or 22 Celsius. Over the next few days, I'm afraid it's more of the same.
London weather, sponsored by Tops Tiles.
The UV Sun Care Report, sponsored by Appeal, patio awnings and conservatory blinds. Shade when you need it.
So UV levels tomorrow will be into the medium category. As you can see, we've got a 4. So, of course, with the children off school for the summer holidays, if they are going to be outside in the garden for much of the day, there will be a fair amount of UV. And beyond that, it's the same. I'll see you later.
Chrissy, thanks very much indeed. Well, the word unprecedented has been said many times today, and there have without doubt been unprecedented scenes here at Heathrow. You've had armed police officers telling people very courteously where the loos are, and you've had people from all over the world saying they understand exactly what is going on and why it's been going on. I've been talking to some of the people who've been caught up in the chaos today. First of all, how's the game going?
Well, the game's going badly for me, but well for him, I think.
You're winning at the moment?
Yep.
How long have you been waiting?
Not too long. We've been here about an hour and a quarter, and it's actually not as bad as we thought it was going to be, actually. We thought we'd be on the motorways for a lot longer than we were, so it was okay. It was not bad.
Book yourself into a hotel. Basically, that's what you're entitled to claim back once if you pay for it yourself, basically.
Yeah.
So how long have you already been travelling?
12 hours. I mean, no, more than 12 hours. I mean, we had to get to the airport and all that stuff, so probably like 18 hours now.
Let's look on the bright side. Two lovely young people like you, courtesy of British Airways, you've now got a night on the town in London. What are you going to do with it?
I don't know. First get a hotel and then, yeah. I don't know anybody in London. Hendrik, you?
Do you know anyone in London?
Actually not, no.
We're a very friendly city.
I hope so.
Where are you trying to get to?
Australia.
What time?
No, 10:15 the flight is in the evening, so we thought we'd get extra early, and we're standing here.
Cliche of the day, be prepared. Were you?
Well, we heard the news very early, and we started thinking about what we were going to do in response to that pretty early on, I think, and we've called round, made sure that it was still all right with our association for us to come and all that sort of thing. And here we are.
And you've got Jack with you, who clearly is the entertainment act of the trip. Well, what have you organised for them, Jack, to keep them happy?
Nothing. Sandwiches, cards.
Oh, have you been called?
We've been called.
And where are you going? Where are you going?
Uganda and Tebby. We're going to do water projects out there. We're going to build some protected springs in a village called Mpigi, which is about 2 hours outside Kampala. So we're there for a couple of weeks.
Great people on a tough day. The world changed on September the 11th, 2001. Today, just a month away from the 5th anniversary of that terrible atrocity, the threat of mass murder using commercial jet planes arrived on our shores. This city already knows the horror of terrorism. Last July, the bombers got through. Today, the security services foiled the plan. It has been chaotic here today. It'll probably be tomorrow and for days to come. almost 70 million people used this airport last year. While some may not have travelled today, like those who used the tube in the days following last July's bombing, they won't be beaten. They will be back. That's the very latest from the London Tonight team this evening here at Terminal 4 of London's Heathrow Airport. But stay with ITV1 for more on the day's story as we cross to the ITV Evening News and Mark Austin, who's just a few hundred metres from me at another part of Heathrow. From all of us here, good night.
It would have been the biggest global terror plot the world has ever seen. They planned mass murder on an unimaginable scale. I'm live at Heathrow tonight, where police believe they could have prevented an atrocity even greater than 9/11. An audacious plan to blow up flights from the UK heading for American cities. In what could be the greatest intelligence coup of modern times, have our security forces prevented terror in the sky?
I want to thank the government of Tony Blair and officials in the United Kingdom for their good work in busting this plot.
The plan was to explode liquid bombs simultaneously on up to 10 flights. The nation's airports are in chaos. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled to and from the UK. On this ITV Evening News special, we'll take you through this fast-moving and still developing story, including what was the plot after dawn arrests across Britain. We'll bring you all the details we have of what was supposed to happen, when and where. We'll be reporting live across the country on tonight's airport chaos. Hundreds of thousands of passengers facing unprecedented security measures, including a ban on hand luggage.
The big question, how long will this last? All we've been told officially is as long as the situation demands.
Plus, we look close up at the liquid bomb, the previously unknown terrorist weapon. Good evening from Heathrow and welcome to a special edition of the Evening News on the day a deadly terror plot to carry out what's being described as mass murder on an unimaginable scale was disrupted. Sophisticated in its detail and terrifying in its scale, it's believed terrorists were going to board flights here in the UK and blow them up as they flew to America. It was apparently just days from being executed and was foiled by the British security services. 21 arrests so far, some of them are British Muslims. As you can imagine, this is a fast-developing story, and in the next 30 minutes, we'll bring you the very latest developments. We're live at the homes in East London, Birmingham and High Wycombe, where police are searching tonight. We'll also have the latest from airports right across Britain, where there are queues and there is chaos. And we're live at Scotland Yard, where further details of this chilling conspiracy are emerging. Now, British airports across the country, packed with holidaymakers, of course, on this busy August day, are tonight scenes of extraordinary disruption. Flights cancelled and delayed. The country on its highest terror alert ever, code critical. Paul Davis reports on a day of chaos.
There is no point in remaining at the airport at the current time.
Chaos, confusion and frustration at Britain's airports today. But it could have been so much worse. The scale of the threat spelt out in the bluntest of language by this police commander.
We cannot stress too highly the severity that this plot represented. Put simply, this was intended to be mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
According to the security services, terrorists were planning to smuggle explosives onto 9 separate passenger planes bound from Britain to the United States, and to detonate those explosives as the planes approached their American destinations. Believing the plot to be in its final stages, police moved overnight. Houses were raided and arrests made here at High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire, 30 miles from the capital. Another police operation was centred on a flat in Walthamstow, East London, raided by armed officers late last night.
Police cars showed up about midnight, vans, and 4 officers put the door in, and from there they just carried on doing what they were doing all night. And they're still there to this moment.
Police also forced their way into houses in Birmingham, where more arrests were made. In all, 21 people are in custody. They're believed to be British-born Muslims. But the police can't be sure all the would-be bombers have been intercepted, so the threat is not over, and the Home Secretary says the state of alert remains at its highest level.
I've already indicated we think that the main players are in custody, but we should always err on the side of caution, which is one of the reasons that we've kept the threat level at its highest and critical level.
It means unprecedented security for those being allowed to fly.
I'll give you a plastic bag that you're going to need to put your essential items in. That's going to be your hand luggage for today.
It's understood the plot involved explosives being hidden in hand luggage. Passengers across Britain are being told only the bare essentials can now be taken onto planes in clear plastic bags.
You need to pull your medication out of your bag and keep it with you.
Parents are even having to taste baby food in front of airport staff. It's believed the plot involved liquid explosives. Heathrow Airport is worst hit. By mid-afternoon, 360 British Airways flights had been cancelled, including all short-haul journeys. Passengers at Gatwick faced long delays, with 135 flights cancelled, including 50 EasyJet services. The disruption spread to Glasgow, where another 30 flights were cancelled and delays averaged 2 hours. The security operation also caused delays and inconvenience at Manchester and other provincial airports. But these passengers at Gatwick were determined to travel despite everything.
We spent 2 hours in a queue, which all the BA staff told us was the right one. Then when we got to the front, they told us it was the wrong one, which is great. So we're another hour in. We will get there. We're being British and stoic. We'll get there.
Honestly, I reckon that this is one of the safer days to fly because of the extra security in place. It's a pain to have to stand here, but in the end of the day, it is safer.
The Home Secretary has been chairing meetings of the government's Emergency Response Committee, COBRA. The clear message coming out of Whitehall is that this operation is still ongoing. The threat to transatlantic travel is still there. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Well, tonight meticulous searches are underway at those properties which were raided. 21 arrests so far, as I was saying. There could be more to come, though. Coordinated raids have taken place on homes in London, Buckinghamshire and Birmingham. The main players, we're told, have been arrested. Our UK editor John Ray is at Scotland Yard tonight. John?
Mark, for 9 long months MI5 have tracked this conspiracy. They knew how they planned to strike, and within the past few days they began to fear that they would strike within days, certainly within weeks. Tonight here at Scotland Yard, the very tough police task is underway of finding the evidence to stand up in court. But already we have some absolutely astonishing detail of a plot revealed. The world's busiest airport, and in its evil intent, what could have been the world's bloodiest act of terror. A plot homegrown but with a global reach. A conspiracy matched in scale and detail only by the operation mounted to stop it. Described today in words that do scant justice to the drama of events.
The intelligence suggested that this was to be achieved by means of concealed explosive devices smuggled onto the aircraft in hand baggage. The intelligence suggested that the devices were to be constructed in the United Kingdom and taken through British airports. The number, destination and timing of the flights that might be attacked remain the subject of investigation.
So the plot was to plant bombs on board planes like this. Typically, each might carry some 350 people across the Atlantic. The terrorists targeted US airlines, among them Continental, United and American. Thousands of British passengers fly with these companies every day. Today, those 3 airlines scheduled 48 flights to the United States from airports across Britain. Some 16,800 passengers in total, each one a potential victim. The terrorist bombs would have detonated simultaneously on 9 aircraft. Perhaps 3,000 people on board would have been killed.
The terrorists plan to carry the components of the bombs, including liquid explosive ingredients and detonating devices, disguised as beverages, electronic devices, or other common objects. While this operation was centered in Great Britain, it was sophisticated, it had a lot of members, and it was international in scope.
A series of anti-terror raids began late last night in High Wycombe, in East London, and another in Birmingham. By early morning, the police had arrested 21 suspects, all in their late teens or early 20s, British of Pakistani origin. Detectives say they have also seized what they call items of interest. That followed a surveillance operation unprecedented in size. Since December last year, MI5 have monitored the men's movements, their meetings, their spending, their phone and computer communications too. As they pieced together the plot, the threat was judged imminent. The police moved in.
When security forces move in on an operation that they say is imminent, they usually mean something that's going to happen within a matter of days. They always leave it as long as they possibly can before they move in, because the more mature a plot is, the more people that they can catch, the more evidence they're going to get.
And tonight, with suspects in custody, police say they are only now beginning what will be a long and complex criminal investigation. John Ray, ITV News.
So yet again tonight, suburban British streets are at the centre of a major terrorist investigation. Yet again we know that at least some of those arrested are British Muslims. Helen Callaghan is in High Wycombe, a scene of the largest number of arrests and an ongoing police operation tonight. Helen.
Well, there has been an enormous amount of police activity here in High Wycombe and a certain amount of surprise from local people that this has become the focus of the police inquiry. And community leaders say that there would be massive amounts of shock here if this turns out to be the place where they find the enemy within.
No one knew, but this area of High Wycombe has been under surveillance for months. When armed police raided this house last night, eyewitnesses say it was dramatic.
3 black cars pulled up outside the house and officers come out in like black clothes and they had bits down here, I'm presuming it was armed officers, and they went all round the house, back of the house, and police officers were banging on the front door. You could hear them at the back, and then one person opened up the door and they pushed them to the side and went straight in.
A family of 4 lived here. Neighbours saw 2 young men leaving with the police. Friends of one of those young men said he'd become very religious recently, attending a mosque set up in a converted house near another address the police have been searching today. This property's been empty for a couple of days, according to local people. Forensic teams have been collecting items from inside rooms and from a makeshift mosque in the back garden.
Neighbours say the family living here also own a property across the road. They're not sure if anyone actually lives in this house, but they do say that cars come and go from here on a regular basis. Tim Wilmington lives next door. When was the last time you saw the family?
My daughter saw them Tuesday night. There were 2 vans, 3 cars outside the house.
But you haven't seen them since?
I haven't seen them since, no.
About half a mile from both houses, investigators have been painstakingly looking through woodland. And this afternoon, a no-fly zone was imposed over the whole area. And amid the speculation, community leaders are stressing that people must keep calm.
The community, certainly the Muslim community, have been through this many times. You get these very high-profile raids with helicopters and live coverage, and it puts fears in people's hearts.
Community groups are keen to point out that Muslim families are as shocked as anyone else that police are focusing on this leafy part of Berkshire. Helen Callaghan, ITV News, High Wycombe.
Now, there were simultaneous raids in north-east London and the West Midlands. Nina Nanar is in Walthamstow, right across London from here, and Geraint Vincent is in Birmingham. To you first, Nina, what's the story where you are this evening?
Well, there's been a huge amount of police activity here in Walthamstow, all within a few streets of where I am now. We know of 5 properties where the police are at this evening, conducting searches, talking to residents. There have been 2 raids as well. The first at the property behind me here on Forest Road was at 10:30 last night. Neighbours say around 20 officers arrived and waited for about an hour and a half before they broke the door down and went to the first floor to conduct a search there. They've been searching there all day. The flat was empty and sold sometime within the last 2 weeks. There was also a raid at a property not far from here on Folkestone Road, a family home, we're told, a home where 2 brothers live, described by everyone as lovely, polite people. There's certainly a great deal of dismay and shock that this community is the subject of such intense police activity today.
Nina, thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Birmingham then, and Geraint Vincent. What's the latest there, Geraint?
Well, Mark, after making 2 arrests last night, police here in Birmingham have been searching at least 2 properties in the city. One of them is the house that you see behind me. Eyewitnesses have talked about how a large number of police officers turned up here at around 3 o'clock this morning, smashed the front door down and led away 2 men, 2 brothers, I'm told, one in his late teens and one in his early 20s. Neighbours have described the people who live at this house to me as a good Muslim family, a peaceful Muslim family. The mother of those men, I'm told, gave lessons in the Quran to local children here. Police haven't confirmed whether or not there's any connection between the raid here and the alleged terror plot, but there are a lot of people in this community who would be astonished if there does turn out to be one.
All right, Geraint Vincent, thank you very much indeed. Now, liquid chemical bombs, that, police say, is how the terrorists had planned to kill thousands of airline passengers. The chemicals would have been smuggled on board aircraft disguised in fizzy drink bottles. No knives, no wires, no detonators needed. Keir Simmons has been investigating the liquid threat.
In 1995, a terrorist cell led by Ramzi Youssef plotted to blow up 11 planes. Youssef is now in prison in America, but his ideas can still be freely copied, and his plan was to use liquid explosives.
These mixtures, made in the proper way, represent explosives that are very, very shock sensitive. And so they're very easily to ignite. You don't necessarily need a spark. You've got to hit it hard, and then it will go bang.
So it would be no surprise if the latest alleged plan involved a similar bomb. There are even internet videos of dangerous liquid explosives.
It's unlikely an explosion like that would be enough to bring down a plane, but a different combination of laboratory chemicals could make such a bomb. And you wouldn't need very much liquid, perhaps 100 or 200 millilitres, an amount you could easily hide in a baby bottle.
Such chemicals could even be mixed on board the plane, and they are difficult for security to detect, but they are also difficult to use.
Any sort of knock, bang, dropping it, let us say putting it in a rucksack which then goes onto the conveyor system, dumping it, it goes through the conveyor system, rumbles over those little rollers. Any sort of impact like that could literally set it off.
To elude security by using a liquid bomb is a simple idea. Thankfully, we do not yet know whether it will be effective. Keir Simmons, ITV News.
The plot was a direct threat to the United States. Words from the White House today. The flights were all American flag carriers bound for American cities, a nation still bearing the scars of 9/11, of course. President Bush said this was a stark reminder his country is at war with Islamic fascists. Angus Walker is in New York and sent us this report.
Homeland Security is raising terror alert levels for flights from Britain to red.
Reports of a plot to blow up transatlantic flights led US network news shows. Americans once again reminded that they are terrorist targets. This afternoon, President Bush addressed the nation, telling Americans that the plot had been an attempt to attack the US itself, but another battle had been won.
That this nation is at war with Islamic fascists who will use any means to destroy those of us who love freedom, to hurt our nation.
A rare photograph of Tony Blair and George Bush speaking via video has been released, emphasising the UK-US anti-terror cooperation. The scars of terror in the skies are fresh memories here, and they're deeply felt in America ever since the attacks in 2001. The threat level at US airports has been put on red or high. Passengers face the same hand luggage restrictions as in the UK. But despite a few delays and cancellations, there was remarkably little disruption.
They're doing a good job here of explaining why it is, and I think by and large people appreciate the extra effort that's being taken.
The so-called shoe bomber Richard Reed attempted to detonate an explosive device on board a transatlantic flight almost 5 years ago. He's now in a federal prison. America is hoping that once again an attack has been successfully stopped. Angus Walker, ITV News, New York.
At the height of the holiday season, our busiest airports are scenes of absolute chaos. Check-in areas choked with passengers. It's thought around 400,000 passengers have been caught up in the disruption right across the UK. British Airways was the worst affected airline. It cancelled more than 400 flights. Budget airline EasyJet grounded 300 flights, and Ryanair has cancelled 46. European airlines cancelled dozens of inbound flights to Britain. Our consumer editor Chris Choi spent the day flying in that helicopter above Britain's airports to get the view from the air.
Well, when the Transport Secretary said there'd be widespread and immediate disruption, this is what it looks like from the skies. From the helicopter here, we've got a great view of Heathrow, and the striking thing is just how little activity there is on the tarmac below.
There will be a pretty immediate impact in future bookings. This is what's really worrying the tourism industry. If planes, if hotels are empty, then I'm afraid that's a lot of money lost by UK PLC.
We're now above Stansted Airport, and if we look down there, 15 or so Ryanair jets just there on the ground, the last place the company wants its aircraft at the moment. This is the drop-off zone, and it's been cordoned off. We can see the cones and special police vehicles there stopping traffic and searching some. In the back, armed police officers.
This is a changing Britain, and you're looking at this as being an ongoing thing with no end in sight. This could just go on indefinitely, and there's no doubt that that what goes on in other parts of the world, particularly in the Middle East, has a direct impact on what happens here.
Of course, we've seen examples during this flight of the incredible inconvenience, the dreadful irritation, even the commercial cost, but all of that, nothing compared with the losses that government feels could have been the consequence of the plot it thinks it's foiled today. Chris Choi, ITV News, above Heathrow.
Right, let's get an update on what's happening at Britain's busiest airports tonight. Let's go first to Glasgow, where our reporter Emma Murphy is there. Emma.
Well, it may be fairly quiet in the check-in area at the moment, but it's been chaos throughout the day. And the reason it's quite quiet is that nobody is allowed in here without a ticket. And the police are actually limiting the numbers that are allowed to check in at any one time because it's so slow. But there's a totally different position over in the departure lounges and on the tarmac. That's where some of the 25,000 people who've been delayed today are currently waiting for flights. And there are also 2 flights that have been waiting for more than 6 hours to get off to America. The people on those flights have been through stringent security. They've been checked twice before they were allowed onto the plane. But the sentiment here is that really they've gone through one Lockerbie in this country. They don't want to go through something on a much bigger scale.
All right, Emma, thanks very much. Next to Stansted, the starting point, of course, for thousands of passengers going off on their holidays. Harry Smith is there. Harry, what's happening there?
Well, Mark, these makeshift destination boards tell part of the story of what's been happening here at Stansted today. Such was the crush of people trying to get into the terminal at one stage that they had to try and post all the cancelled flights out here. As you can possibly see, they've run out of space. More than 90 flights have now been cancelled. That's a third of those that should have left here. As you can possibly see behind me, there's still a lot of people waiting. They don't know if, they don't know when they'll get out. They have been told that they may have to wait overnight. A lot of people have just given up and gone home. Others have resigned themselves to waiting. I spoke earlier to one group of Dutch tourists. They were packing their bicycles onto a bus. They were off to get a ferry from Harwich. Otherwise, they'd have to wait here for a flight until Monday. Mark.
Harry Smith at Stansted, thanks very much for that. And finally to Manchester, let's check in with our reporter Tim Rogers. What's happening there, Tim? Well, Mark, thousands of people, of course, have had disruption here today, and one of them was a pilot who worked for a subsidiary of Continental Airlines, the American Airlines. He was strapped in his seat in business class, waiting to take off, when suddenly he says he was approached by people on the plane who told him he would have to get off. And his reason for that, he says, he can only think it's because he had a Muslim-sounding name.
Basically said we're not taking any standbys of passengers today, and I understood that. But you know, it was just me. I didn't see anybody else. And,
were there other standby passengers
I'm
on there?
sure there were, but you know, I guess I made the profile, and they escorted me off the flight.
Continental Airlines say they're investigating what happened there. There's more disruption likely here tonight and again tomorrow. Back to you. Tim, thank you very much. That's the roundup of Britain's airports this hour. Now, the Prime Minister was aware of this plot before he went on holiday. COBRA, the emergency committee which deals with emergencies like this, met this afternoon in Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Libby Wiener, is there tonight. Libby, are they viewing this as a major success today?
Well, Mark, this afternoon President Bush described the British as being plot busters. They're not exactly using the same sort of language in Downing Street, but I think there's a quiet satisfaction that a potentially horrendous series of terrorist attacks has been foiled. Now, as you say, John Reid, the Home Secretary, was here this afternoon chairing a meeting of COBRA, the Emergency Cabinet Committee. I'm told, though, that the Prime Minister, although he is on holiday, is in constant touch with their Cabinet colleagues, and I can vouch for that. I was speaking to an official here in Downing Street about half an hour ago. He had to rush away to speak to the Prime Minister. Another official says he's been on the phone constantly. Now, as to whether Tony Blair knew much about this plot before he went away, well, I'm told categorically, although he did speak to President Bush, that was in very general terms, and the final piece of this jigsaw regarding this terrorist plot only came to light in the last 24 hours.
Libby in Downing Street, thank you very much for that. A reminder now of the big story tonight. A sophisticated terror plot to blow up American Airlines flying from Britain to the United States has been disrupted. Britain is on its highest terror alert. 21 people have been arrested. The conspiracy involved taking bottles or cans with chemicals on board and blowing up the planes mid-flight. And there's chaos at Britain's airports tonight. Up to 400,000 passengers are affected by delays and cancellations.
And the headlines in London tonight: raids across the southeast. 21 in custody. Arrests are made at a house in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire and a terraced house in Walthamstow in East London. Thousands remain stranded at London's airports as police react to a security threat on an unprecedented scale.
So tonight, Britain is on the highest terror alert ever following the foiling of this massive plot. Part of us is breathing a huge sigh of relief, but another part of us is simply horrified at the reality and the sheer scale of the threat in our midst.
The 7th of July 2005, the day terror came to the streets of London. Indiscriminate death, appalling scenes. We hoped and prayed that that was a one-off committed by a handful of disaffected young British Muslims. But it wasn't. There was apparently another attempted attack that very month, and now this. Terrorists, again, probably homegrown, and bent, we're told, on murder and destruction on an unimaginable scale.
Carry on as normal, says John Reid, but try telling that to people about to board an aircraft that may, just may, be blown out of the sky. There's nothing normal in that. And in a way, the terrorists have achieved one small victory today. They've caused massive disruption here and a sense of vulnerability that will be extremely difficult to shake off.
And so we must come to terms with what's happening. The threat is real. Our lives really will never be the same again. Tony Blair talks often of the battles being waged in Iraq and in Afghanistan, but the truth is this so-called war on terror is also being fought right here in our cities, our towns, our suburbs, on our very doorstep.
And that's it from the ITV Evening News tonight. Coming up on the news at 10:30, we'll have all the latest, of course, on this rapidly developing story as more information comes to light about the precise details of the plot. We'll look in depth at the intended targets in America, and we'll profile the plot busters, the teams that foiled the plan to murder thousands of air passengers. Join me for that later, but for now, from Heathrow Airport, bye-bye.
Sky News at 7. Mass murder on an unimaginable scale. A plot to kill hundreds of people by bringing down aircraft heading for America. Chaos at Britain's airports as the security alert is raised to critical. 21 people in custody. Officials say it's a worldwide plot, a global inquiry. The plan to use liquid explosives disguised in hand luggage, the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda. The President and the PM, an anti-terror operation discussed at the highest level.
Live from the Sky News Centre, this is Sky News with Jeremy Thompson.
Very good evening. Anti-terror police in Britain say they've stopped an attempt to carry out mass murder on an unimaginable scale. The target, flights to America. The plan, to carry liquid explosives on board disguised as drinks. Use detonators hidden in everyday electronic items. The result, arrests, houses being evacuated, chaos in Britain's airports, and a police investigation on a global scale. The key developments this evening: 21 people have been arrested in London, Birmingham and the Thames Valley in a series of raids aimed at a group of suspected terrorists. 9 houses in High Wycombe have been evacuated. Increased security has led to major delays at all British airports, with passengers urged to stay away unless their journeys are essential. All short-haul flights to Heathrow have been cancelled. President Bush said the plot was a stark reminder that the United States was still at war with Islamic fascists. It's believed the flights were heading to Washington, New York and California.
Thank you for your patience today while we work to ensure your departure as soon as possible. Your security is our first priority.
Chaos and confusion at airports across Britain as stringent new security measures were implemented.
We're not allowed any hand baggage through today. The only thing is going to be allowed to travel with your travel essentials, so your passport, boarding card and wallet pretty much. No books, no newspapers, no magazines, no nothing.
Thousands of air travellers up and down the country all face the prospect of serious delays.
We won't get in again, as there's no communication among you lot. Seriously, I've just been out there.
Who do we listen to, please? Do we go out or do we go from here?
If the doors are closed, how are we going to get out?
Many of them were unlikely to even take off at all. From Heathrow Airport to Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, Glasgow, Stansted and others, the story was the same. As Britain's terror threat state was raised to its highest level, people were told to only travel if it was absolutely necessary. Hundreds of flights were cancelled. Travel misery across the board as police revealed the scale of what was planned.
We have disrupted a plan by terrorists to cause untold death and destruction and to commit, quite frankly, mass murder.
It's emerged that President Bush had been fully briefed by the Prime Minister about the latest developments in a video conference call.
This nation is at war with Islamic fascists who will use any means to destroy those of us who love freedom, to hurt our nation. I want to thank the government of Tony Blair and officials in the United Kingdom for their good work in busting this plot.
All 3 airlines that were to be targeted are American. The United States has also raised its terror alert state to its highest level. In London, the Home Secretary described the police operation as complex and ongoing.
We are involved in a long, wide and deep struggle against very evil people. This is not a case of one civilization against another, one religion against another. It is a case of, in general terms, of terrorists who wish to use evil methods against the rest. And therefore there is common cause in this country among all the people of this country, from whatever background, religion or ethnic dimension, because the threat is common to us all.
Mr. Reid chaired at least 3 meetings of COBRA, the government's top security council. Police made 21 arrests, reportedly all young British Muslims, in London, Birmingham and High Wycombe.
2 police vans showed up. 4 uniformed officers broke the door in. They just disappeared, and the house was, there was about 20 undercover police officers went straight in there, and they've been there all night since.
This property in the Buckinghamshire town remains sealed off by Thames Valley police officers. 9 other houses were evacuated as part of the operation. Detectives say the investigation has involved unprecedented levels of surveillance.
We have been looking at meetings, movements, travel, spending, and the aspirations of a large group of people. This has involved close cooperation, not only between agencies and police forces in the United Kingdom, but also internationally. As is so often the case in these investigations, the alleged plot has global dimensions.
So while the police work continues, so too do the airport queues. Those who did get on flights were only allowed to take a limited number of items on board in a single plastic carrier bag. They included wallets, passports, essential medicines and baby food.
I recognise that these measures are already affecting many families and individuals seeking to travel at this busy time of year. I would assure you, however, that every effort is being made to address the operational challenges being confronted by our airlines and our airports.
A previous terror alert saw armed troops deployed at Heathrow in February 2003. The government subsequently faced criticism from some quarters for overreacting on that occasion.
Your attention please. To reduce the number of security alerts, please keep your luggage with you at all times.
But police and transport officials insist these latest counter-terror measures will remain in place until they're completely satisfied the threat has passed. Enda Brady, Sky News.
A little bit of breaking news from the Middle East, or rather from the United Nations, that perhaps raises hopes of a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The United States ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, has just said that there could be a vote tomorrow on a UN resolution aimed at ending the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. And coming out of Jerusalem tonight, a lawmaking advisor to Prime Minister Olmert is saying that a ceasefire resolution was being drafted at the United Nations at the moment, and to quote, a new proposal is being drafted which has positive significance that may bring the war to an end. We also know, because we were talking about it very short time ago with Mark White, that Margaret Beckett, the British Foreign Secretary, is heading to New York. She's had difficulty getting on a flight today, so it appears that she's going via France, and will also be heading towards the United Nations to help get that new resolution through tomorrow. Back to the story of the terror plot now, and this alert, of course, has caused huge disruption to flights to and from the United Kingdom. British Airways has cancelled 203 of its domestic and short-haul flights in and out of Heathrow and Gatwick. The Spanish carrier Iberia has temporarily cancelled flights from Heathrow, and Air France has grounded planes to and from Heathrow. EasyJet's cancelled all of its flights from Gatwick, Luton and Stansted. The German airline Lufthansa has resumed its inbound flights to Heathrow, but of course with some delays. And passengers departing from other UK airports can also expect delays. If you're due to fly, check on the situation before you leave home, and we'll try and keep on top of the very latest developments here at Sky News for you. Let's go now to Sky's Chris Roberts, who's been at Heathrow all day monitoring events. How's it looking there tonight, Chris?
Yeah, very good evening to you, Jeremy, from Heathrow. Normally, of course, the world's busiest international airport. On an average August day, you'd see something like 200,000 people arriving and departing from Heathrow on board around about 1,200 flights. Well, not today. 600 cancellations, about 300 arriving planes and 300 departing. You do the sums and you get something like 100,000 people who've had their travel plans completely wrecked today. Add on to them the thousands of people who've had their flights delayed. And there are still hundreds of people, you can probably see behind me here at Terminal 4, waiting to see when or if they can get on board their flights. The story, of course, doesn't end here. There have been major delays, major problems across the country, as Sky's Mike McCarthy reports.
Peak holiday season, and across the United Kingdom, an airport security operation without precedent in its scale and complexity. Hundreds of thousands of passengers arrived to scenes that may come to define the way we had to live in the early 21st century. At Britain's biggest and busiest airport, Heathrow, the congestion was most severe, as the reality of this latest terrorist threat dawned on passengers.
They could be targeting innocent people on their side, or they could just be scaring us into submission. It's either or. I don't know which it is. I'm pretty scared either way.
In Manchester, many of the airport's 37,000 daily passengers were due to fly around breakfast time, just a few hours after the security alert was announced. Here, staff were immediately redeployed, many onto duties involving direct communication with travellers.
With every single one of the passengers facing an individual hand search, staff have been pleased that the unprecedented measures have resulted in relatively little disruption. But everyone here is left wondering whether all of this will increasingly become a way of life.
Most passengers were philosophical, but one British traveller believed that clumsy profiling and excessive suspicion led to his being asked to leave a flight bound for the United States.
Deep down, I'm really angry, but I mean, there's nothing much I can do about it. It's just, if we're going to be victimised and, you know, abused this kind of way.
In Glasgow, as elsewhere, passengers were told that they could take only bare essentials on board and that everyone would be searched.
I've just been told to empty all our hand luggage. There's a security alert on, and of course we've had to transfer things into cases, so I just hope we haven't lost anything out of it, you know.
In Belfast, the strict security measures left passengers with some last-minute repackaging. These scenes were repeated in Bristol and every other major provincial airport. But although the travel plans for thousands of people have been thrown into chaos on this day of disruption, the story from around the country has been one of determination to return to normality as soon as possible. Mike McCarthy, Sky News.
Well, Chris, I mean, the thing that surprised me looking at Heathrow and all the other airports is actually how well everybody's behaved, really, considering what chaos the whole country's air system has been thrown into today.
Extraordinary, isn't it, Jeremy? I haven't found a single person today who's been whinging or moaning or kicking up a fuss. People remarkably stoical, given the sort of travel nightmare that they're all going through. I mean, the main problem, of course, is this hand baggage issue for people who are getting on board planes, and just the sort of limited bare essentials that they're allowed to take on. They're all being handed out these little clear plastic bags. Most of them are carrying their wallets, their purses, their identity cards, passports, airline tickets, something like that, and that's about it. That's about all you can take on board. Liquids, of course, as we've been reporting throughout the day, immediately sort of raise suspicions. And the one sort of group of people I've found who are having problems are young mothers, because they've been told that if they're taking baby milk to the plane, to get it on board, they've got to unscrew every bottle, taste the milk, just to prove that that's exactly what it is. One woman I was talking to earlier trying to head to Sri Lanka, that's a 10.5-hour flight. I mean, how on earth is she going to make enough baby formula to last that distance? And she had these little sort of packets of food as well. Not allowed to take those on board unless she opens them and tests that as well. But you're quite right. The overall sort of stoic nature of people during this crisis really has been quite admirable.
I think really, as we were saying, talking to some of our security experts, they were saying, Chris, and this is going to be a worry for everybody now, they can't imagine security levels going back to where it was before. In other words, I'm afraid we're all going to be in clear plastic bag land every time we fly in future. Is that starting to sink in yet?
It is. The other interesting thing, Jeremy, I know you fly a lot, is how a lot of airlines have been gearing people towards actually taking more hand baggage on. You know, some of the budget airlines are charging people if they're taking heavy bags onto a plane, but if you've got it in your knapsack, in your hand luggage, you can sort of pile it full of things and still get on board the plane. Another guy we spoke to earlier, who was a former British Airways manager, was talking about Terminal 5 that's due to open here in 2008, and a lot of the security measures there have been geared towards people taking large amounts of hand luggage and not so much in the hold. Well, if these restrictions stay in place, and certainly there's no sign of them being lifted at the moment, they're certainly going to be in place tomorrow, then what kind of problems is that going to cause?
Chris, stay with us. Just got a couple of lines of breaking news that we should bring people. Now, we're hearing from American sources, Reuters quoting that 5 more suspects in this bomb plot have been urgently sought by British investigators. British police are declining to comment on this line that 5 more suspects are being sought. And another line coming out of Islamabad tonight that Pakistan has made a number of arrests which helped to uncover the plot to carry out mid-air bombings of planes between Britain and the United States. That's according to Pakistan's Foreign Office. So an interesting picture started to emerge about the broad scale of this whole investigation. But, of course, for thousands and thousands of people today, Chris, it's been a day of incredible disruptions. And just throwing forward, I mean, it's peak holiday season. Most people, apart from all the people going on business trips, there are thousands, tens of thousands going off on holes. What's the outlook for them over the next 24, 48 hours?
Delays and disruption, I think, in 2 words, Jeremy. Interesting you're talking about more possible suspects still on the loose. You remember John Reid talking earlier today, saying that they think they've got the sort of main players in this, although it's certainly no time for complacency. Ironically, of course, in situations like this, people say, well, this is possibly the safest time to fly. Look at the kind of security measures that are in place at the moment. Could it possibly be any safer? Which is why I suppose we haven't seen people running out of the terminal building here saying they're not going to get on board flights. Now, I wonder how people are going to react to the news if it's confirmed that some possible key players in this alleged conspiracy are still at large.
Chris, thanks very much. Chris Roberts at Heathrow. Police say the plot involving using liquid chemicals which would be hidden in everyday objects and then detonated on board an aircraft in flight. If that was the plan, then it's one that groups linked to Al-Qaeda have been trying to carry out for a number of years. Here's Sky's Peter Sharp.
The target, the nation's transatlantic air links. The victims, passengers aboard flights heading west to America. The delivery system, volatile liquids in hand luggage mixed in flight. The objective, a carefully planned mid-air simultaneous attack on packed transatlantic flights. The outcome, mass murder on an unimaginable scale. Today's failed attempt is a logical extension of work already carried out by Al-Qaeda in its development of a micro-bomb designed to evade airport detection. Hidden on the internet, these precise instructions detail the preparation, placement and detonation of an onboard bomb. The terrorists, each carrying different components, board the aircraft and assemble the bomb itself in the toilet. Chemists have suggested 3 different scenarios to Sky News. The first is that 2 or more chemicals of a different density could be poured into a bottle before boarding. These could be kept apart by a membrane or simply shaken to create a potentially explosive cocktail. This could then be ignited using a detonator disguised as a phone, an MP3 player or an electronic key fob. The second possibility is that 2 chemicals could be carried on board the plane in separate containers and then mixed together. Again, a detonator would be used to trigger the explosion. The third scenario is that the terrorists might have planned to suspend a powdered explosive called TATP made from household cleaning products in a liquid. It would have the consistency of paint and also could be detonated using a hidden device.
You need a very small charge. I mean, all that's required is to pierce the hull of the aircraft. And the hull is pressurised, so if you pierce the hull, it depressurizes the cabin. The pilots lose control of the plane and the plane potentially breaks up.
Today's foiled attack is not unique. Only last year in Northern Ireland, this man, Abbas Boutrab, was jailed for 24 years for downloading information on designing a micro-bomb to attack passenger aircraft.
Abbas Boutrab hasn't broken his silence. He hasn't let on who else he might have been working with. And the assumption is that, you know, there may be a lot of people out there that are connected with that.
Just taking it straight to LAX, Los Angeles Airport, one of the potential targets. There's seen a lot of disruption today. Just going to hear from local officials there.
In the early hours of this morning, Scotland Yard announced the arrest of 21 individuals suspected of plotting to detonate liquid explosive devices on as many as 10 aircraft bound for the United States. There have been no confirmed reports of a similar plot on American soil. However, as a precaution, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has raised the threat level throughout the American airline industry. The City of Los Angeles has been in communication with the Department of Homeland Security and directly with British officials, including Prime Minister Tony Blair. In addition, I've been in contact with Governor Schwarzenegger, who's committed the state's full support and cooperation. I'm here with representatives of our airport and leading law enforcement agencies to ensure the public that we've initiated a complete and rapid response in the city of Los Angeles. These events provide a clear and ominous reminder of the fight against terrorism and demands our constant vigilance. This is a long fight, but we're on the case and we're serving notice to terrorists. We will catch you before you set foot in our airports, and we will put you away for the rest of your lives. We have no information indicating that any LAWA facilities or flights are the target of any specific threats or plots. I repeat, we have no information indicating that LAWA facilities or flights are the target of any specific threats or plots. Los Angeles World Airports and the City of Los Angeles nevertheless remain committed to providing the necessary resources to maintain a high level of safety and security for the traveling public and airport workers. Allow me to address the specific steps we're taking to ensure the safety and security of our airports. Los Angeles Airport Police are working with the Transportation Security Administration, other federal and local law enforcement agencies and airlines to implement a range of security measures appropriate to the heightened security level. LA law enforcement presence at LAX includes hundreds of uniformed and plainclothes officers from Airport Police, the Los Angeles Police Department, and numerous federal agencies, including the FBI, the Federal Air Marshals, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, as well as canine patrols and Special Operation Unit. Our officers are on the ground and on alert. 5 airlines operate 20 daily non-stop flights between London Heathrow International Airport and LAX. Air New Zealand, American Airlines, British Airways, United Airlines, and Virgin Atlantic Airlines. These 5 airlines are reporting that their flights to London are still going to depart today. We advise passengers bound for London Heathrow and people arriving passengers from London to check with their airlines before coming to the airport to verify flight times. Due to new measures instituted this morning by the TSA, all passengers are being asked not to pack any liquids in carry-on bags, including beverages, hair gels, lotions, etc., as well as electronic key FOBs. Passengers are advised to check the TSA's internet website at www.tsa.gov for a complete listing of what passengers may pack in checked luggage and carry-on baggage. Due to the heightened federal security screening is taking considerably longer than normal. We recommend passengers to get to the airport 2 to 3 hours before a domestic flight and 3 to 4 hours before an international flight. This guidance will remain in effect until the threat level is reduced from orange to yellow. While the public will notice some increased security related to operational alertness, other security measures are confidential and may go largely unnoticed by most people. These include fixed and roving vehicle checkpoints, additional uniformed and plainclothes patrol officers, motor units, and K-9 patrols. I'm very proud of the level of cooperation and information sharing demonstrated today. I can tell you that whether it's the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Transportation Security Administration, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Executive Director in the Department of Lawa Airports, or the Chief of Police, the Fire Department, we're all working closely together. Someone asked me a few minutes ago, are you ready for an event of this nature? And I said that we're preparing for that every single day. I do want to say that with me today is
just
Council
taking
President
away from LAX,
Eric
the
Garcetti,
main Los Angeles International
Councilmember
Airport
Janice
there,
Hahn,
where
Councilmember Bill
the
Rosendahl,
official there just
Councilmember
explaining
Jack
that
Weiss, the Chair of Public
their
Safety,
threat
as
level had been
well
raised
as the
today
city
after Scotland Yard
attorney,
announced, in his words there, that liquid explosive devices were to be placed on board 10 planes. That is the first confirmation we've really had that 10 planes were involved. We've heard between 6 and 10, but they obviously have received that information from Scotland Yard and from security officials on either side of the Atlantic there. We're also hearing out of Scotland Yard ourselves that all those arrested during the course of this investigation dealing with this foiled terror plot have now been processed into custody, and Scotland Yard say that they have 24 people currently held in connection with this terror plot, and the investigation is still going on. Well, some news on the Middle East crisis now. The British Foreign Secretary is heading for New York tonight. Skies marked white in central London. And it sounds from the movement of the Foreign Secretary and what we're hearing out of Jerusalem and New York that moves are afoot. It looks like the new resolution may be gathering some momentum.
Well, that's certainly the hope, Jeremy. Of course, while the government domestically has been very much focused on this alleged terror plot, the Foreign Secretary has been very concerned with the continuing crisis in the Mideast and those efforts to get this United Nations resolution which could bring about a ceasefire in Lebanon. It looked very hopeful last week that the United States and France were coming to some kind of agreement to put a UN resolution before the Council. But since then things have deteriorated somewhat, so the Foreign Secretary is hopeful that perhaps by going to the United Nations now, she might be able to act as some kind of intermediary between the United States and France in trying to secure this resolution. And the main sticking point appears to be over the process in which the Israeli troops now in southern Lebanon are taken out of that country, are put back into Israel, and this new international peacekeeping force, in conjunction, we think, with the Lebanese army, goes into that territory instead to try to keep Hezbollah under control. That has been the sticking point. That is what Margaret Beckett, by cutting her holiday short in France, hopes she can bring some kind of resolution to, Jeremy. She was, as I say, holidaying at a caravan park in France. She came back to the UK last night for a crisis meeting on this, was planning to go to the United Nations from Britain today. Couldn't do that because of all the chaos at the airport, so went back to France. But she is now en route to the United Nations, due there this evening, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's worth just giving you these quotes from Mrs. Beckett. She said tonight, the people of Lebanon and Israel are suffering. I'm very concerned about the worsening humanitarian situation in the area. We need to ensure that we make urgent progress in establishing safe corridors to move people and resources safely to where they're most needed in southern Lebanon. And Downing Street's also put out a statement this evening saying that Tony Blair's continuing in his efforts to find a solution to the Middle East crisis, and whilst he's on holiday in the Caribbean, he's had a productive phone call with Jacques Chirac, the French president, which they talked in detail about the Middle East conflict as well as about the terror plot and the need to get a rapid agreement to try and bring about a ceasefire in the Middle East. Now, the Metropolitan Police Deputy Commissioner said today was not about communities, it was about people who wanted to commit murder. But it has once again raised the fear that extremists are willing to attack this country, can be born and brought up on British soil. Sky's Emma Birchley has more.
Never has Muslim Britain faced a more difficult time than it has in the past year, battling a perception that their communities are harbouring young men prepared to commit mass murder. News of more arrests and another alleged plot to kill innocent people was something they'd been dreading.
It's very, very sad. Number one, there's a problem of the threat, and number two, we suffer a double whammy as Muslims. There's a huge stigma attached to the whole community as a result of what a handful of people are perceived to have done. We must make sure that people don't use this as a pretext for spreading more and more hatred, because that's exactly what terrorists want to do.
The first time it emerged that a British Muslim had succeeded in carrying out a suicide attack was in 2003. Asif Hanif, a student from London, here on the right, detonated a bomb in a busy bar in Tel Aviv, killing himself and 3 others. A similar attempt by Omar Sharif from Derby failed. Britain's Richard Reid and Sajid Badat were also jailed for conspiring to blow up planes. All this before the bomb attacks on London last summer, which killed 52 people.
From the moment it became clear that men born and bred in Britain were prepared to kill for their cause, the vast majority of Muslims in this country have been fighting to show that Islam is about peace. Another alleged terror plot only makes their task even tougher.
The war on terror has brought tighter legislation. There's concern that's heightening the discrimination faced by Muslims. Only this week, the UK's highest-ranking Asian officer called for an independent judicial inquiry into the radicalisation of a minority of young men.
The cumulative effect of Islamophobia, both internationally and nationally linked to social exclusion, has created a generation of angry young people who are vulnerable to exploitation.
It's only a very small percentage of people. I mean, I think the biggest problem is we don't even know within ourselves whom are these individuals. I mean, it's only when they come in the media. And to be honest, I mean, if this, I would like to see the evidence being placed against them before we make any comments. Because the thing is, I would like to think they're not guilty until proven.
It's a message shared by the Imam of Abu Bakr Mosque in Southall.
On many occasions, Muslims are always targeted first and foremost. And most of the time it happens that without any evidence, Muslims are the first community or the first religion that's there to be attacked.
For those vulnerable to radicalisation, websites like this attempt to encourage extreme behaviour. It's a path only a small minority ever choose to take. The problem for the majority is dispelling an image created by the actions of a few. Emma Birchley, Sky News, Southall.
A little bit of breaking news just before I talk to my guests in central London. US Homeland Security officials are saying that all the people arrested by the United Kingdom in the plane plot were British citizens. So we are starting to build up more of a picture now from the little bits of information coming out through Scotland Yard here, from the Homeland Security in the United States, from airport officials and from French officials as well. So US Homeland Security officials now confirming that all those arrested in the United Kingdom were British citizens, and we are now being told tonight that there are 24 being held in custody in connection with this. And an official at Los Angeles airport said a short time ago that they had been told by Scotland Yard that the plot involved an attempt to take liquid explosives on board 10 different planes heading out of London towards the United States. We understand that Washington, D.C., New York and Los Angeles were among the target cities. Well, let's talk to Russell Razak now. He's a doctor and expert on suicide bombers and the psychology behind their actions. Very good evening to you.
Good evening.
First, paint us a picture, if you will, of the type of young British citizen, as we're now being told, who would consider these sort of acts.
Well, as was very correctly pointed out in your report, it certainly is a very small minority of British Muslims who fall down this wayside, really, as it were, very far away from the mainstream. It starts off from a bit of an itch, if you like, in the earliest years of childhood, when we're in our infant years, that's when we really develop our own identity as to who we really are. And that's all about the kind of parental bond that exists and the intimacy between parent and child. And sometimes you can come out of that process with a sense of sort of don't fit inness, a sense of not feeling easy in your own skin. Now, that can be quite well hidden in the unconscious and something that isn't really demonstrated in later life until perhaps a point when an experience of racism or rejection can lead to that exacerbating into somewhat of a greater wound. When that happens and it's not then sort of counteracted by more integrating experiences in life, then the youngster is very vulnerable to the kind of ideology that attracts these people. And the reason why that ideology attracts these particularly vulnerable people is because it actually blows that wound wide open. It tells them that, yes, you are different, but you're different for a reason. You're supposed to be different. You're part of a select and chosen group of people who will be rewarded, not in this life, but in the next life. And people who are far enough down that road can actually start buying into that, and then that takes them, as we know, to the most extreme forms of behaviour.
So those within the Muslim culture and faith, are they more susceptible, or is it just at a moment in time that it appears to appeal to those susceptible and vulnerable?
Well, a lot of it is to do with the sort of consequences of being an immigrant in Western society. A lot of the suicide bombers that we see, particularly in the West, are themselves first or second generation immigrants. And that itself leads to a great degree of dissonance in your upbringing. You have one culture and community at home in your parental life and another completely different one out in society. And often these changes begin to occur around adolescence when they begin to leave the home, often going to university. And many of them actually do go to university and are, actually achieve quite well educationally. And it's at those times when there's a big difference.
A generation ago or less, I seem to remember that in a way there were problems with young West Indian men who were second generation in this country. Their parents had come across looking for a better life after the Second World War, had got jobs here, but the youngsters found it very difficult to adapt and felt again that they were being they weren't on an equal footing. But they didn't blow up planes. They didn't carry out suicide bombings. Why does this particular generation of young Muslims, why are they so very different?
Well, that's a very good analogy, actually, because in the black community, two things happened that were different. Well, there are two differences in that situation. One is that they were able to form an integrated synthesis second-generation culture. So there very much is a culture out there, particularly now, obviously, that we see, that involves a pride in being both black and being British at the same time. And that evolved very quickly. It's not being evolved quickly enough within a Muslim culture within this country. So there is some sort of lack of integration in terms of the concept of being both Muslim and British. That hasn't happened.
But is that down to the culture itself, the society, or is it, I mean, their own society, or is it ours, the traditional citizens of this country? And where do we meet in the middle? How do we overcome this problem?
Yeah, there's a combination of things. I mean, one is that there's a significant journey to travel, actually. In terms of Islamic culture, for example, there are many significant differences from Western culture, and because of the bridge, there's a greater bridge to actually overcome, and that's the responsibility of both sides, the host culture as well as Islamic culture, to try and find ways to cross that divide. But also, of course, the other thing that has been a factor in this is the fact that there's developed, almost like a virus, a very malicious, toxic ideology that has spread across the world. And that ideology has been based on a very extreme perversion of the Quran, but one, nevertheless, that has managed to sort of infest, if you like, infect the minds of these young people who are particularly vulnerable. And, there's a number of theories around how this actually does follow almost like a virus in terms of the ways that the ideology travels from mind to mind and actually evolves itself from generation to generation to become more and more potent and extreme. And it's the existence of that ideology, which is like a toxin that is waiting for people who are experiencing these vulnerabilities to take those very few who are at that extreme and particularly dangerous juncture way out of the mainstream.
Do they grow out of it? Can they be talked out of it? I mean, in a society and in a community like a Muslim community where the imam, the local leader of the faith, is probably the most influential figure, can they not lead to a more positive path, should we say?
Yes, certainly there is hope all the way up till the very last stage. For example, all the way up to the stage when they've got, to the point of actually making explosives, etc. All the way up to that, certainly a lot can be done. Unfortunately, not enough is being done, and it's not necessarily going to come from the imams and the traditional sort of Muslim hierarchy, because often the imams and others are first generation, they live in a different culture to the second generation, who are angry about different things and they have different experiences. What really needs to be set up is a sort of second generation support network almost, so that mentoring can occur in local mosques and local schools and universities, and so that people can begin to identify with each other and find that they have a home in this country, very much their own synthesis culture. So that will occur not just through forming networks and support networks as well, but also by promoting film, promoting other aspects of the media, fashion, music, so that there's a whole culture out there that people can feel at home with. The idea of being both Western and Muslim not being in any way a contradiction.
What about economic factors? Clearly, a lot of these young people will find themselves quite disadvantaged when it comes to getting decent jobs and earning on equal terms with the rest of the society they see around them. I mean, is that a factor in it, or am I way off beam?
Economic factors can have some influence in so much as that they may lead you to cross a path in life that causes you to experience some racism or rejection. And when you haven't got many sort of successes in terms of economic success, qualification, education that can help you travel up the escalator of life, then yes, you're probably more vulnerable to experiencing racism or other forms of rejection that will lead to these terrible experiences that may push people in that direction. But it's not really based entirely around that. I mean, as I say, there's a very large preponderance of university graduates, particularly of graduates in science subjects and more than art subjects, and that shows how a lot of it is quite cognitive, sort of psychological, in terms of the way that they have been brought up to think in very black and white terms, good and evil, and heaven and hell, thinking in these extreme terms. And it's that form of thinking that develops, as I say, through a psychological development that is more important a factor, really, in this than immediate sort of obvious environmental factors.
It's clearly a problem that's not going to go away quickly, and it's a pretty bleak picture you paint. Is there anything positive that we as a society can do in this very complex set of circumstances to try and change the circumstances that give rise to these young men?
I think there's two things, really. The first is global in terms of foreign policy, to be honest, because at the end of the day, terrorism feeds on paranoia, and Islamic terrorism feeds on the paranoid notion that the whole of the West are part of a conspiracy to defeat and destroy Islam. Now, that notion is actually fed by foreign policy, for example, that leads Muslims to feel like they're victims. And so there has to be some thought put into foreign policy, and I'm not the first person to say this, and I know that it's a very well-understood factor here. But beyond that, there's the more sort of psychosocial aspects. For example, support networks for parenting when you have, say, a first-generation immigrant that's come to this country that actually will need help in terms of rearing their child in a new environment, a new society, and trying to bridge those differences. Then further on, mentoring networks for younger children in terms of living through the dissonance of growing up in a Muslim household but then coming out into a Western world, going to university, going to bars, etc. And then later on, obviously, there's the other aspect, as I've mentioned already, in terms of forming a culture that makes people feel at home of being both, a Muslim and a Briton at the same time.
Russell Razak, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating insight into perhaps what drives these people to dream up the sort of plot that has been foiled that could have brought chaos in the skies. Now, those caught up in the chaos down below at British airports faced long queues and stringent security checks today. Well, Sky's Catherine Jones travelled to Heathrow as the drama unfolded to listen to some of the passengers' stories.
Going on holiday or heading home, today no one's journey was going to be easy.
I'm on the train that's heading towards Heathrow. As you can see, it's packed with passengers hoping to fly today. I'm going to see what it's like for the ordinary people caught up in all this.
Sally Watson is going to New York to visit her brother, but the news had made her very nervous.
So what have you heard this morning?
That there's been plots to in mid-air, but that it wasn't planned for today.
That reassures you?
It slightly reassures me, yeah.
But are you still worried?
Yeah. don't like flying full stop, so very concerning for me.
We found the queues already stretched outside the terminal doors. Inside, there was a crush of confused passengers. Luckily, Sally's dad had phoned to warn her to prepare to travel light, but in every spare corner of the check-in lounge, rearranging luggage was proving the biggest headache.
And all my fragile things that were going to be carried on have to be put in the suitcase.
And do you mind?
Yes, I mind. No, I want it to be safe. I don't care.
Here's the leaflet that people are being given as they check in, and it tells you what you can and can't take on. There's obviously a concern about liquids because you can't take on medicine if it's in liquid form, no contact lens solution, and you'll have to taste the baby milk that you want to carry with you. Does it worry you to fly?
Right now, I'm more frustrated than worried.
The children were a bit apprehensive, but I guess it'll be more enhanced security, so it'll probably be better than ever today.
Past check-in, the queue for security stretched the length of the terminal, but Sally Watson had found the huge crowds had actually calmed her down.
So, Sally, you've been at the airport a few hours now. What's it been like? What's your experience so far?
I feel a lot more safer as there's a lot more people still flying, so quite reassuring that I'm still going.
Sally's flight took off after a 2-hour delay, and all the passengers I met also put up with all this with a kind of calm resignation, an attitude air passengers may have to have for some time to come. Catherine Jones, Sky News, Heathrow.
Neil Doyle joins me again. He's a terror expert and author and journalist, and they've written books about the very sort of plot that we've seen foiled here, and presumably, from all we're hearing now, 10 planes may be involved, 24 people under arrest, all British homegrown terrorists, or would-be terrorists from what we gather. It's the very worst nightmare for the security services, isn't it, really? And in a way, the sort of plot that you've been charting for a long time now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just about the worst-case scenario, I think. 10 planes, so many people involved, and the fact that they're all British is highly worrying. And the fact that, you know, so many personnel have been committed to this, you know, the flip side of that suggests that there are a lot more in reserve who could step forward and replace those people. So, you know, it smacks of confidence also, this organising this kind of operation.
One assumes that after 9/11 and the sort of international alert that went on after that, and the fact that American forces went in and did their utmost to smash al-Qaeda cells in Afghanistan and so on, that the infrastructure was damaged, and the terror groups that might have been capable of this were set back a bit. Do you sense that they might be gaining strength from what we're seeing unfold here?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the US attack on Afghanistan, it destroyed a lot of al-Qaeda's infrastructure in terms of training camps and dispersed personnel. But I think since then, the same kind of facility has sprung up on the other side of the border in Pakistan, and to a large extent may have been rebuilt. And so you still got terrorism factories in that region. And, you know, we've seen in previous cases that, you know, people have been travelling there for training, particularly final specialised training in explosives and bomb making. Yeah, it's the worst kind of scenario for the security services.
And the fact that the plot involved aircraft, again, it's something that seems to have fascinated some of the terrorists for a long time, and they obviously think it's worth another go, despite the much heightened security that now surrounds air travel.
Yeah, I mean, they've obviously judged on this occasion that actually hijacking the planes was maybe out of the question, and that the second best thing would be to blow them up above major cities. Yeah, and the fascination with aircraft has been one of al-Qaeda's kind of hallmarks since the beginning, really. And experience shows that they chip away, continue hitting the same targets, and keep going until they're successful.
This just reminds about Ramses Yousef and the Bojinka plot, because in a way that was the first alert, wasn't it, that they were trying something on planes?
Yeah, that's the goal there was to blow up a dozen airliners, mostly above the Pacific Ocean, and that involved liquid explosives, the same as this case. And the master planner of that in 1995 was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who went on to mastermind the 9/11 attacks in the States. And he's now in custody, but yeah, the fascination with aircraft...
It's been at it for a dozen years almost.
Yeah, at least, yes, yes.
Neil Dawes, thanks very much again for your input. Colin Brazier is going to be here from 8 o'clock tonight, taking you through till midnight, so let's find out what Colin's got in store. Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. The threat of terror, of course, affects us all, and today all of us have been affected, maybe by the severe disruption at the airports, maybe by the police raids in various towns, or maybe simply by feelings of anger or fear. Well, we're keen on your views, whoever you are. Email us, news@sky.com. Please include your phone number, and we will try to get back to you.
Look forward to that. Thanks a lot, Colin. Well, you've been writing into our weblog today in your hundreds, and all very keen to put your views across on this terrorist threat. Here are a few of your thoughts, just a selection, but thank you all for taking the trouble. Darren from Manchester says the police are doing a magnificent job and I feel a lot safer because of them. They get very little thanks these days, so I'd like to go on record as saying thank you to the police. Trevor writes, people are quick to point the finger whenever something like this happens. It's totally wrong to blame every Muslim for acts of terrorism caused by a few idiots who have been brainwashed. Arif says it's only a matter of time now before all people who are dark-skinned have to go through separate security checks while everyone else walks by, all because of the actions of a small group of people. Sam in London says, I hate the fact that we can never live in peace, always living in fear that we are going to be targeted by terrorists. No matter what has gone on, it doesn't make it right to kill innocent people. Kevin Beckett sends us a blog from Cambridge, and he says, I would like to thank all of our security forces who put their lives on the line to look after the people of this country. But if you'd like to take part in the conversation today, why not go to sky.com/news and look out for the link to the Live at 5 weblog. Well, today's events, of course, have forced huge changes on security checks at British airports, and some of them may be scaled down over the next few days. Others may be in place from now on. So what would happen if we needed to change the way we get around? Malcolm Taylor is a transport infrastructure advisor, joins me in the studio. Malcolm, very good evening to you. Well, what of that? People have been asked to sort of go through hoops today. Is that going to be the norm?
Well, I don't think you're going to see that as a norm and an everyday sort of expectation that people are going to have. I mean, it's clearly been an incredibly difficult day for not just the passengers, but for the authorities to actually try and control and, if you like, organise the circumstances and the situations that people find themselves in. I think it's about expectations, and on a day-to-day basis, when you've got an airport which is dealing with a whole number of airlines, aircraft coming in, and people queuing up, working through, if you like, their transport chain as they come out of the railway or off the buses through all the systems. Normally on a day-to-day basis, when everything is working fine, it's pretty straightforward. People have expectations of maybe only an hour or two to check in. Once you have the complications today, when everything just goes, really becomes very, very difficult, all sorts of things start to happen. You're getting planes that can't land because planes haven't taken off to allow the slots. You have people getting in very congested spaces in the terminals and things like that. The way in which designers deal with that is really wanting to try and ensure that at least as best you can, you have, from a passenger and a people point of view, enough space and capacity to actually get people feeling comfortable, get people to recognise that they're in a very difficult situation. So what I tend to imagine will happen is that people are going to have to deal with recognise that they must allow more time to travel. And the authorities, BAA today, for example, were able to, as you saw from the reports from people did accept the problems that they had. But the new terminal designs, such as at Terminal 5, do allow much greater space for storage of people. And so it is all about how you look after people, how you make sure that the flows of people as they move through these facilities can be managed and kept separate. Lots of control and security to make sure people do behave and that difficulties don't arise. So it is all about controlling and organising, thinking about the softer issues in design so that people can have a degree of comfort in those sorts of really quite difficult situations.
So none of us like sleeping at airports if we don't have to.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Malcolm, we must leave it there. Malcolm Taylor, transport infrastructure expert, with his views saying, don't worry, they're taking care of how the airports of the future may look. Well, just coming up in a couple of minutes, plans for mass murder on an unprecedented scale. Colin Brazier is here with the very latest on the terror plot.
A terrorist plot to bomb planes leaving British airports has been foiled. Police say it could have caused mass murder on an unimaginable scale. It's alleged up to 10 flights would be attacked with liquid bombs placed in hand baggage.
Had this plot been carried out, the loss of life to innocent civilians would have been on an unprecedented scale.
Well, tonight Scotland Yard's confirmed 24 people were arrested in raids. American TV claims 5 more could still be at large.
Well, in a moment we'll be live at Heathrow, where hundreds of flights have been cancelled and hand luggage has been banned. There is disruption at airports across Britain, with passengers told not to travel unless it's absolutely necessary. And the chaos extends to American airports. President Bush says the US must remain vigilant.
Hello, very good evening to you. Police say they've disrupted a massive terrorist attack on transatlantic flights. Scotland Yard say it would have resulted in mass murder on an unimaginable scale, with thousands of deaths.
Now, security sources say the terrorists could have acted in the next few days. The Home Secretary John Reid said that if the plot had been successful, the loss of innocent life would have been unprecedented.
Well, in an operation that started early this morning, Scotland Yard arrested 24 people in London, in Buckinghamshire and in Birmingham. ABC News in America is reporting that 5 more suspects are still being sought. There's been no official confirmation of that line here.
And the alleged plot is believed to have been targeted at possibly 10 separate flights.
Experts say that liquid explosives in drinks bottles combined with electronic devices have been involved.
Britain's official terrorist threat level now remains at the highest, critical.
And there's intense security at all airports. Hand luggage has been banned. Hundreds of flights have been suspended, many even cancelled.
Well, we'll have the latest from Washington, the Metropolitan Police and Heathrow in just a moment. But first, a full report of the day's events from our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford.
It was a chilling plot. One official described it as even bigger than 9/11. If detectives are right, terrorists were intending to blow a succession of transatlantic aircraft out of the sky to terrify passengers by launching waves of attacks.
There's no communication among you lot.
Police believe they foiled the plan in the nick of time, but ministers have had to order a massive increase in security at airports.
The police, acting with the security service, MI5, have carried out a major counter-terrorism operation overnight to disrupt an alleged plot to bring down a number of aircraft through mid-flight explosions. Had this plot been carried out, the loss of life to innocent civilians would have been on an
Well, unfortunately, we seem to have had a technical problem with that. We have lost the sound. We'll bring you the rest. I think you probably got the gist of what was going on in that top report. We will be getting an update from Daniel Sanford himself in a second. But first, we're going to take you to the United States, to Washington, for the latest on the report from there that 5 more people are still wanted in connection with the plot. Our correspondent, you can see, Guito Howard, is in Washington. Guito, what can you tell us about this statement from ABC News?
Well, I can't tell you what their source is, but I can tell you that they are reporting that 5 people are still at large and are being hunted, the word used by them. And it comes as part of a report that seems to have an awful lot of detail. They say that 3 of the ringleaders of this plot have been identified. They give details that 2 of them are believed to have recently travelled to Pakistan, that they apparently got their tickets there and received money from there. So it's a very detailed report, but the source of that report is far from clear.
And what is the nature of the plot as far as they're explaining?
Again, there are sort of the level of detail is quite startling there. What they say is that the plotters were envisaging taking on explosives in fizzy drink bottles with real, genuine fizzy drinks on the top that you could have tasted and it would have reminded you of what it was meant to be, but beneath, in a sort of false bottom, if you like, of that bottle would have been the explosives, and they would have triggered that with a flash from a disposable camera, apparently enough of a sort of electrical charge to trigger an explosion. That's what, at the very least, they claim was behind the plot and how it would have worked.
Is this ABC alone, or are the other networks starting to pick up on these strands of information that are coming out?
There are lots of little details that are emerging across different networks and websites and newspapers and all that kind of stuff, most of them quoting anonymous security sources. Some of the details about the number of arrests in Britain seem to sort of emerge this side of the Atlantic almost as soon or even sooner than it did over where you are. The details that they're all British nationals, but that there was a Pakistani connection has been something that has gone on here. And, of course, the level of concern here is extremely high, conveyed, of course, within the context, as George Bush put it, of a war against what he described as sort of Islamic fascists.
Yeah, extraordinary phrase. Guito, thanks. Plenty for us to pick up on here.
Right, well, let's get straight with our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford. I mean, what is made of what's coming out across the Atlantic, Daniel?
Well, first of all, it's worth saying that the official sources here are saying absolutely nothing to confirm the ABC report that 5 more people are being sought. They're just saying, well, that's ABC and nothing to do with us. That said, there have been rumours floating around all day from intelligence agencies of foreign powers based in London saying, well, we think they haven't quite got them all, maybe they're seeking some more people. You have to bear in mind that the Home Secretary, John Reid, was quite specific in his public statements today that they believed that they had the people that they suspected were the main players. He was quite straightforward about that. But as I say, there are rumours sloshing around that there are people that they haven't got. So whether or not there's a certain amount of game playing going on isn't quite clear at the moment.
Because is there an explanation for the number having gone up from 21 to 24? What's an hour ago we heard there are 24 people who have actually been arrested.
Yes, I suspect that's just quite straightforward false accounting or bad accounting. I think they've looked at the end of the day, well, look, how many people have we got in the various police stations dotted across the country? And I think when they worked it out, they've come to 24. I don't think there's suddenly been 3 further arrests tonight. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I suspect this is simply them totting it up because they simply can't fit all of these people into the normal police stations where they hold them. So I think it's a certain amount of just checking who they've got.
OK, and that figure's only just come out a short time ago. I noticed on another wire, Pakistan again. Pakistan have been speaking a lot in the last hour. A lot of sources coming out saying that they were heavily involved in this. They had a local arrest a few weeks ago, which was a trigger. This bit of copy is saying that 2 or 3 local people were arrested in recent days in connection with it. I mean, obviously it's complicated, but is it possible to tell how much this has been an international operation?
I think it's without doubt been an international operation. I think quite likely some of the really primary information did arise out of Pakistan and maybe was channelled through Washington and ended up here in the UK. But it's also worth remembering that foreign intelligence agencies don't like the way the British authorities work. The British authorities tend to make arrests and then shut up. And then all the guys who've been helping them say, well, hang on a minute, we want to claim some credit here. We want to make sure that people realise what we've been doing. and then they start to leak. And we've seen this before with operations that have involved Pakistani intelligence and American intelligence. So I suspect that a certain amount of what's sloshing around is true, but you're not going to get the British services to confirm it.
And what is made now of the timing of any potential operation and why the arrests were made now, bearing in mind the surveillance has been going on, as you've been saying, for what, since December, for 8 months?
Well, I think there are a number of things going on. I think the definite perception was, from their early intelligence, this wasn't something that was going to happen now. It wasn't something that was imminent or anything like that. It's possible that Lebanon might have been some sort of a trigger, maybe bringing things forward in the alleged plotters' minds. But I sense there was something else this week, not quite clear what, something else that happened overseas that made the authorities here think this could trigger these guys to go now or to go underground, and we better go in. I think that was something, which nobody's telling me what it is, that happened in the last day or two, because I sensed there was a kind of gentle preparation for when they might make these raids, and then suddenly yesterday, not panic, but a certain amount of hurrying.
Right. Well, Daniel, thank you very much. Thank you.
Tantalisingly cryptic, that, isn't it? Next hour, we want more. The Home Secretary, John Reid, said he was confident that the main figures in the alleged plot are in custody. 2 were held in Birmingham and a house in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire was raided. But the main focus of the investigations continue to be in East London. Our special correspondent Richard Bilton reports now from Walthamstow.
Move across the area and it is the scale of the operation. Different police teams at different addresses. An officer in the doorway is the sign of the raids that rolled across East London last night.
11:45, 2 police vans showed up, one in that end, one in that end. 4 police officers got out in uniform, bashed in the door. They opened the door, the undercover police went straight in.
That kind of police activity has a big impact. Take one street. Here there was a raid and locals believe a man was arrested. His neighbour, who's known him all of his life, was woken by the clamour.
I know, it was at 2 o'clock this morning. The dog started going mad. We could hear loads of hammering at the door. The dog wouldn't stop barking. The security light came on round the back. And that was about it. We went back to sleep. That's all I could tell you.
His friends hang around in the street outside. They watch the police operation, but say they can't believe their friend was involved in any plot.
He's a nice guy, really nice guy.
What way?
Oh, he, kept himself to himself and just played football, practiced his religion, never got into trouble, always looked out for the younger lot, gave respect to everyone.
This is a mixed community. It has a high Muslim population and is just up the road from Forest Gate. There, 2 months ago, a man was shot by the police in raids that ultimately found no terrorist activity. There is more police activity here tonight. East London at the heart of this operation. These raids have produced a sharp response here. Of course, there's support if any plot has been stopped, but there is pressure on the police to show that the intelligence was right and the response was proportionate. Richard Bilton, BBC News, Walthamstow in East London.
Now, at one of the other locations, our correspondent Russell Hayes is at the scene of the raid in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. He's been speaking to a member of the town's Muslim community about the implications of today's operation.
And the police are continuing to maintain the cordon around the 3 homes that were raided in the early hours of this morning. It's expected to be maintained throughout the night. You can see this one continuing here. A real shock amongst the local community. This is a mixed area of Asian, Afro-Caribbean and white people, and a real shock at the events overnight. With me is Mohammed Khalil, who's one of the recognised community leaders here.
Hello.
First of all, your reaction as a Muslim to the events that took place overnight. It's believed all the families involved were of Asian origin.
Yes. First, the whole community's reaction is the same as my reaction, which is one of waking up to a shocking situation, shock and horror, that here we have our very harmonious, multicultural community in the headlines for the wrong reasons, and that's the first concern. Secondly, really for the families concerned themselves, because High Wycombe is not known to be an area where we've had infiltration of any extremism activity. So that's the other shock to us. And of course, thirdly, the thought that what's happening in the world today with world events may well be fueling this type of activity, if it is indeed true.
Yes, and of course we don't know. People have been arrested and they have not been charged, so we cannot prejudge that. But
yes.
Even so, perhaps other members of the community might ask the question, despite their anger, can there be any justification for the alleged activities?
Let me make it absolutely clear. As a Muslim and as the religion, as a multicultural person, there is absolutely no justification whatsoever to harm life, property in any way whatsoever. Whether that be in High Wycombe, whether that be on aeroplanes going to America, or whether that be bombs from Israel to Lebanon and Palestine. We deplore and condemn strongly any attack on civilians, any attack on life of any sort. And that's the difference at the moment, is the worry is whether world events are fueling these fundamentalists.
How do you think the police have handled this, given that this is a mixed community?
The police got in touch with key people, myself included, contacted early this morning after the raids had taken place. In fact, the media had actually shown it all over the various channels. So the discussion did take place with the police as to whether we should have been consulted prior to the raids. They in turn have said it is a Met-led operation and that they were really acting on behalf of the Met, so they were unable to do so. So we're going to take this as a discussion point in the meetings in the next few days.
Briefly, do you think this shakes, damages community relations here?
Community relations is of paramount importance. When the hype of the media has left the area, we want the people that are brown, black, white, Afro-Caribbean, Muslim, Christians, that were living side by side in a harmonious manner to do so after all this has died down. And that's of paramount importance, and I think everybody is committed to making sure that we try and achieve that.
Mohammed Khalil, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
From High Wycombe, back to you.
Russell Hayes there, in one of the key locations where those arrests were made early this morning.
Just after 8:15, let's bring up to date with our main story. The headline on that, of course, is police say they've disrupted a massive terrorist attack on transatlantic flights. Scotland Yard says it would have resulted in mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
Scotland Yard say they've now arrested 24 people in London, Buckinghamshire and Birmingham. The American television is claiming that 5 more suspects are still being sought.
There's been turmoil at Britain's airports. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled. Hand luggage has been banned.
Right, well, on that subject of thousands of air passengers being disrupted and cancellations and delays at the airports across the UK, of course, after new tighter security restrictions were imposed. We're going to look at that in a moment because Heathrow, of course, has been one of the key airports, but in total, 70 airports have had severe restrictions in total, and there are still warnings that will carry on till tomorrow. Just on the wider politics of what's been taking place, of course, and the information that's coming through. Incidentally, you saw the figure went up from 21 arrests to 24. That's a new statistic which came out just over an hour ago from Scotland Yard. And it appears to be almost perhaps, possibly anyway, a sort of correction of the earlier figures from the various raids. So a figure of 24 people now in total who have been arrested from the several raids of the terror plot early this morning.
These are the pictures reaching us now of Heathrow Airport. So you can see those crowds of patient passengers that have been coming to us throughout the day. A stoical approach for the most part from people who've realised, even before they set off this morning, that today was going to be quite a long wait. People who've been told that they will not be able to take any hand luggage on the flight. Indeed, they've been issued with simple see-through plastic bags to take mere travel documents, medical essentials, and been told that they're not allowed liquids on board. If they have babies, small children, they've been told they'll have to test even the bottles of milk and water that they want to bring on board. And we understand that this could be a permanent fixture now, or at least a fixture for the foreseeable future for people getting planes. That kind of scene really throughout the UK at many airports, up to 70 airports throughout the UK. At Gatwick, we were told people turning up for the night may indeed end up bedding down until dawn. 48 hours more of this kind of chaos.
Now let's just have a look at the issue of homegrown terrorism, because if this does turn out to excuse me, have been the case, that the terrorists, the people behind any plot are found guilty, and they appear at this stage, the people who have been arrested appear to mostly be British. We've seen British suicide bombers before, of course, in particular July the 7th in London, but also 2 men, for example, who went over to Israel, and each time that has led to the political debate as to whether foreign policy, for example, is involved. Well, let's speak to George Galloway now, who, of course, is a critic of the government's foreign policy. George Galloway, it's a great relief to see that there have been so many arrests, assuming that an operation was underway.
Yes, I mean, of course, we must enter the caveat that if it's true, if the story turns out the way we're currently hearing it, and many such stories in the past, as you very well know, have not turned out that way, then clearly the security services and the police have done a magnificent job in stopping what would have been a depraved and despicable act of mass murder of thousands of people, and that would have been an unmitigated total disaster. So if it turns out that this is the true story and these 21 were intent on this act of mass murder, then we must not only breathe a sigh of relief but salute those responsible for destroying the operation before it got underway. But the issue that we must confront, and it's one that was pregnant in your remarks really, is how come so many young British men would be prepared to incinerate themselves and thousands of others? How come this radicalization is gathering pace in our own country and around the world? And I'm afraid any sensible person has to conclude that it's connected to the foreign policy, the role that our country is playing in the world because of the foreign policy of George W. Bush.
Do you, just on the actual operation itself, do you have confidence in the way things are being run?
Well, definitely there's an improvement. I myself was called by the chief superintendent in my own borough. He very carefully explained to me what was happening, and that nobody from my constituency or from our borough was amongst those arrested, but that the young men had been arrested from surrounding boroughs, and undoubtedly, on the face of it, this seems like a very considerable triumph for the police and the security services, and I have no hesitation whatsoever in congratulating them if it turns out that way. But I just enter the caveat that we've seen Forest Gate, we've seen the Stockwell Tube, we've seen the plots that never were at Old Trafford to blow up the Manchester United football team and so on. And we've seen so many people arrested and so few of them actually tried, and even fewer convicted. So we must keep a little bit of our powder dry on this. But on the face of it, the operation seems to have been a very considerable success, and many lives have been saved.
Precisely because there have been homegrown attempts, if you like, involving British-born Muslims. There has been a great effort, would you agree, by the Muslim community over recent years to try to reach to people who are radicalised. I mean, does this demonstrate that there is a fault with the path that is taking, assuming that this whole plot has existed in the way it's described?
Well, you know, all a Muslim needs to do to get radicalised is switch on News 24, open any newspaper and see the carnage in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and walk out on the street and be stopped and searched and be subject to the kind of rabid hysteria in places like the Sun and other parts of the Murdoch empire and so on. That's what's radicalizing the young Muslims. And the way I put it is this: there's a swamp of hatred out there against us, mainly outside our country, but also inside our country. And that swamp is getting deeper with each new round of bloodshed in which we, thanks to our Prime Minister, are involved. And instead of draining that swamp of hatred by dealing with the causes of it, we're constantly re-watering it and making it more and more toxic. And now we've been lucky today, thanks to the skill of our security services and our police men and women, we've been lucky today. But we'll be lucky if we're always lucky. If you live by the side of a swamp, you need a fly swat, that's for sure. but it's unlikely to be enough to protect you from all that's germinating in that swamp.
Let me just
you need
ask
to drain
you,
it.
Let me just ask you, because there's some news just coming through from the Press Association, in fact involving one of the wider foreign policy issues, Lebanon, and it is saying that Tony Blair is, or at least people speaking for him, are saying that he believes there is the potential for agreement on a UN resolution concerning Lebanon over the next 24 hours. Now, this is very different from how the last couple of days have been described at the UN in New York, but there the Prime Minister having some hope of a resolution in the next 24 hours. That would be good news indeed, would it not?
Well, we've been hearing about Mr. Blair's confidence about the end of the killing in Lebanon for now 29 days. Insofar as it has not stopped, he's partly responsible. He did everything that he could at the G8, in the European Union, at the United Nations, to stop these organizations demanding an immediate ceasefire, because he was following the policy line of George Bush and Israel. Everybody watching knows that to be true. If the resolution is passed, of course that's not the end of the bloodshed, because the resolution as currently framed does nothing to solve the problem. It gives Israel everything it's demanding. It gives Lebanon nothing. It does nothing for the prisoners in the Israeli dungeons, thousands of them taken during the 18 years of illegal Israeli occupation of the south of Lebanon. It doesn't return to Lebanon the territory stolen in 1967 by Israel, the Sheba Farms area. It doesn't deal with the Palestine question. It doesn't deal with any of the...
It's designed to be a two-step process, of course, of a second resolution following.
But the people who are on the steps into despair are the poor people in Lebanon, 45% of whom are children, and half of the remainder are women, and they're all dead in the last 29 days.
OK, well, George Galloway, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Let's just reiterate that news we're getting now from Downing Street. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, saying that he believes there is potential for agreement on a UN resolution. Important word, that, potential for agreement on a resolution concerning the crisis in Lebanon and Israel over the next 24 hours. This was after, 48 hours where people thought that the UN draft resolution looked close to collapse. There had been such optimism on Monday and Tuesday. By yesterday, it was looking as if nothing would ever actually get agreed from that first draft of the resolution. But now we're hearing from Downing Street, whilst Tony Blair is, of course, on holiday in Barbados, but keeping a close eye on the situation, there is potential for agreement within the next 24 hours. Now, sources have told the BBC that the principal characters being involved in the plot were British-born. Some have links to Pakistan. A senior Pakistani security official has told the AFP news agency that Pakistani intelligence agencies helped British authorities foil the plot. Our correspondent Dan Isaacs is in Islamabad there. He's on the phone. Dan, first, can you just tell us a little bit more, anything being said about those who may have been involved in the plot, certainly the ones who've been arrested there?
Yes, it's a little bit more concrete now. The Pakistani Foreign Ministry, I've spoken directly to them, and they say that there were direct cooperation between the British authorities, the Pakistani authorities, and the US authorities in the operation to arrest not only those people in Britain, but also some people within Pakistan. Now, when I pressed her further and said, could she be more specific on those people arrested in Pakistan, she couldn't. They were arrested within Pakistan's borders, and that there were a few of them. Now, this clearly puts a new light on links between the Pakistani authorities, and they're very keen to stress that there was close cooperation, not just in the arrest, but the whole operation to thwart the attempted bombings of the airliners.
We know that certainly some of the 7/7 bombings in London, bombers from London last year, had been to Pakistan, attended madrasas there. Is there any suggestion of what those links to Pakistan might be, or again, is that part of the caginess at this stage?
Well, it's clearly a very sensitive issue within Pakistan. Many outside Pakistan believe that Pakistani militants operate with far too free a hand within Pakistan, and not just those bombings last year on the London Underground and the links, if you like, to people who had visited Pakistan, but also last month, the bombings in India on the Mumbai commuter trains, in which over 180 people died. India has implicated Pakistani militants as well. Militants militants operating inside Pakistani territory of involvement in that. So Pakistan has a very difficult issue to resolve because it is perceived as harbouring, if you like, militants on its soil.
And that's why they've been so clear to reiterate and so constant to remind us or to tell us, indeed, we're looking at some wires from the Foreign Ministry here, that Pakistan has played a very important role in uncovering and breaking this international terrorist network. They want the world to know, as it were, that they've worked hard with our governments.
Exactly. I mean, the Pakistani authorities and President Musharraf has a double-edged problem. He's been working very closely with the United States authorities on arresting and tracking down al-Qaeda members within Pakistan and across the border into Afghanistan. But he's also charged by his critics of not tackling militants operating on Pakistani soil and carrying out operations outside Pakistan. So clearly there is a great sensitivity here in Pakistan about the role of Pakistanis involved in militant operations outside its borders.
Dan Isaacs, thanks for now.
Well, this is BBC News 24. Still to come.
I'm Philippa Thomas at Heathrow. We're inside Terminal 4. You may be able to see there are still thousands of passengers queuing here for long-haul flights. In a few minutes, we'll also be updating you on the airport situation in Europe and the United States.
Right, we'll be with Philippa shortly.
Right now, though, I think we're going to check on the weather for you with John Hammond.
Thanks, Emily. If you've got plans for the weekend, you're going to have to ride your luck because there's going to be a fair amount of rain around, particularly across the eastern portions of the UK. Most places dry at the moment, but it's cool out there. Cool and breezy night to come. Winds coming down from the northwest and bringing a few showers to northeast England now and clipping into East Anglia. Most places dry, but it will be a fresh night, 11 to 14 degrees typically. So a cool start, a lot of cloud for Cornwall and Devon, the odd shower clipping into the north coast, I fancy, and the west coast of Wales as well. A lot of cloud across Wales first up. This is breakfast time, 8 o'clock. Northern Ireland starting off pretty cloudy too, but a lot of dry weather. And for Scotland, I'm hopeful the cloud will break up quite nicely. Some sunshine across central and southern areas, one or two showers still across the far north, but the breeze easing down. For northern England, a bit of an east-west split, really. West of the Pennines, some sunshine early in the morning. Further east, always more cloud, and some of those showers will start to drift back inland again. So after a bright start across East Anglia in the southeast, we could see some sharp showers later on. Next few days, on the cool side, with a few showers around too.
Get the headlines every 15 minutes here on BBC News 24.
When it's your job to relocate game around South Africa, it's still essential to have a routine. You've got to get up, feed the baby, walk the dog, start the helicopter, move the giraffe, get the antelope back and spray that wildebeest. Follow the adventures of this extraordinary family. Bet Safari next Thursday at 8 on BBC One.
Just after 8:30 this evening, let's bring you up to date with all the developments that have taken place throughout the day on this foiled terror attack. 24 people arrested as we speak. Police say they've disrupted a massive terrorist attack on transatlantic flights. Scotland Yard says it would have resulted in mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
Yes, they now say 24 people were arrested today during the raids in London, Birmingham and High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. Unconfirmed reports from the United States claim that 5 more suspects may actually still be at large tonight, although there is no official comment on that at all here.
Throughout the day, hundreds of flights have been cancelled or delayed, causing huge queues at airports. Security's been tightened. Almost no hand baggage is being allowed onto any of the aircraft.
The Home Secretary has chaired 2 meetings of COBRA, the government's emergency response committee, with senior members of the police and the security services. The official threat level has been raised to critical, which means an attack is regarded as imminent.
And President Bush has said that the arrests were a stark reminder that the US was at war with what he called Islamic fascists who were out to destroy freedom.
Now, away from the alleged plot for the moment, so we've heard there are thousands of air passengers disrupted by the cancellations and delays at airports across the United Kingdom. This is all after new, tight security restrictions have been imposed. Now, at Heathrow, cancelled flights and delays in security checks have left terminals overflowing with stranded travellers. Well, our special correspondent Philippa Thomas is there with passengers at Terminal 4. Philippa.
Chris, thanks. And you can see a sample of them behind me. In fact, there are thousands of passengers here at Terminal 4 alone. Just next to me, they're queuing for flights to Abuja, to Bangkok, to Singapore, to Sydney, to Dubai. They're all hoping to get those long flights before the night is over, and they've been told that even if they're delayed, they really should get onto those flights. And what a day it's been for air travellers here and across the UK. They've had delay, disruption, frustration, but the story from here and from the other airports has been one largely of passengers remaining calm in the face of all these frustrations, because here they do understand the heightened security concerns. People understand what is happening to them and why they are having to undergo these extra checks. This is the story of the day at Heathrow Airport from our reporter Denise Mahoney.
This is Europe's busiest airport at the height of the holiday season, and tens of thousands of people are going nowhere, and no one knows how long it's going to last. All internal UK flights and short-haul flights into Heathrow were cancelled. Most outbound flights were also severely disrupted. The result, queues and confusion.
They don't seem to know what they're doing. One person gives me one information and another one gives me different information. So I've had about 10 different information since I've been here since 9 o'clock this morning.
We actually don't know what has happened. We are blank. I mean, we were only told that you have to wait.
Are you confident you'll get home?
Eventually. We hope so. We hope so. Yeah, it's a tough day.
Passengers whose journeys weren't essential were asked not to come to Heathrow, but that didn't stop long queues forming. Tighter security affected those few passengers able to board flights.
Does anybody else need a clear bag?
Everyone warned only bare essentials could be taken on as hand luggage and only in see-through bags. It's fine to bring wallets or purses like this on board, but handbags and rucksacks are banned. Prescription medicines are okay, and even things like nappies you can take into the cabin. But all drinks are banned, and even things like baby's milk are having to be tested in front of security staff to make sure they haven't been tampered with. There's been chaos today at airports right across Britain. At Manchester, Britain's biggest regional airport, queues built up in the terminal building, with passengers facing delays of up to 3 hours. At Birmingham International Airport, a similar picture with 25,000 passengers held up. 20 flights were cancelled to destinations including Paris and Amsterdam. And Stansted Airport in Essex says dozens of flights, many of them on budget airlines, were also cancelled. But despite the emergency, many holidaymakers, like the Weatherhead family from Solihull, were determined to stick with their travel plans, undeterred by terrorism.
I'm not worried. I feel that the security is going to be better today than it would have been if we perhaps travelled yesterday.
Airport authorities expect the delays to continue throughout tomorrow. Travellers are advised to check with their airline and be prepared for a long wait. Denise Mahoney, BBC News at Heathrow.
Now, the team that runs the world's busiest international airport has been up since the wee small hours, trying to oversee this radical shift in security here at Heathrow. A short time ago, I spoke to Tony Douglas. He's the managing director of BAA at Heathrow, and I put it to him, this must be the biggest challenge his staff have ever faced.
It's been a fundamental change over a very short period of time, from 2 a.m. In the morning, when clear notification was made that there would need to be security procedures to be revised. As from first thing this morning, we've moved at great pace in order to be able to communicate very clear messages as to what that means with the travelling public and, of course, our own employees. Let me put that into perspective. 200,000 customers a day here at Heathrow, up to 70,000 people working here by 5 o'clock this morning needed to know that there had been a radical overhaul of security procedures. So a huge communication challenge. It clearly did lead to real difficulties earlier on today, and as the day's gone on, things have started to ease slightly, but there's still a long way to go given the scale of the changes that we've seen.
Inevitably, some passengers have complained about the situation, said they didn't feel they knew what was going on fast enough. What do you have to say to those who've been stranded or delayed today?
It's very difficult for passengers in situations like this. Nobody would want to be left in an airport when a change of this nature has been implemented, and I would like to formally pass on my sincere apologies to anybody who's been inconvenienced as a result of this change. But it's legally enforceable. It's something that, as everybody can see, we've taken very seriously, and as a consequence we've strived hard during the day to communicate as best as we can.
Now let's look forward to tomorrow. Are you still saying to passengers with flights booked tomorrow, don't come unless it's essential?
Not at all. The airport's open. It's been open all day today, and it'll continue to be open tomorrow and going forward. The restrictions, however, will continue to be in place, and the message for travellers is very clear. Don't bring carry-on luggage. Don't bring personal belongings unless they fit the list that's been provided and they're presented in a clear plastic bag. And please, most importantly, check with your airline that that schedule's being operated tomorrow or over the weekend before you come to the airport. And finally, allow enough time for the new security processes.
That's Tony Douglas, the Managing Director of BAA here at Heathrow. Now let's take you across the Atlantic, because during the day the authorities in Washington raised the alert level on transatlantic flights to its highest level ever for the first time. They also insisted on tighter restrictions on hand luggage, but the Department for Homeland Security insisted that so far there's been no indication of a plot within the United States. From New York, here's Brian Barron.
Huge breaking news this morning as British officials announce they've broken up a major terror plot to blow up.
Breaking news this morning.
This was a sombre start to the day for millions of Americans. All media outlets focusing on the dramatic disclosures from across the Atlantic. As more details emerged, President Bush was travelling out of Washington to Wisconsin in the Midwest. This is the Commander-in-Chief who has made the threat from terrorism the defining theme of his presidency.
A stark reminder that this nation is at war with Islamic fascists who will use any means to destroy those of us who love freedom, to hurt our nation. I want to thank the government of Tony Blair and officials in the United Kingdom for their good work in busting this plot.
Here at JFK Airport in New York, there's been an immediate increase in the armed security presence, and no one's complaining.
We caught 21. That's a step in the right direction.
The more security, the better, I guess.
But some travellers at JFK were unaware of the drama on the far side of the Atlantic and the new restrictions facing passengers.
No liquid? Oh, I didn't know that. I have to throw away my water then. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Since when is it?
This morning.
This morning, okay. Nobody told me yet.
So far here, there have been no huge delays, but that could well slip in the hours ahead. A state of red alert, the highest security level ever declared in America, is now in force for all flights to and from Britain.
Well, the disruption caused by today's foiled terror plot quickly spread from airports in the UK across Europe. About 50 flights from France to Britain were cancelled, and that included 10 Air France services to Heathrow. Most of those were due to leave from Paris. The French Interior Minister announced increased security measures on all services to Britain, and all hand luggage is now going to be thoroughly checked. We've also heard that there will be random checks carried out on cross-channel Eurostar services. In Germany, thousands of travellers at Frankfurt faced disruption. The budget carrier Air Berlin cancelled its services, the majority of its services to Britain today. The German carrier Lufthansa said flights to Heathrow have now resumed, but around 5,000 passengers were affected because about 36 flights to Britain were cancelled during the day. And travellers wanting to fly from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, a really key hub, also faced delays as aviation authorities there stopped all flights to Heathrow before 6 o'clock. The Dutch carrier KLM said thousands of its passengers had been affected. So that's the picture across Europe. Just to say, the queues are moving here. They're moving slowly, but they are moving. People are optimistic that they will get away tonight. We've been told it's business as usual at Heathrow tomorrow, and that they're going to try to run all the flights, but passengers must take note that they have to check with their carriers first, see if their flight is still going, because there will be some cancellations. Back to you.
Philippa, thank you very much.
Well, if you want any more on that, you can, of course, go to our website, bbc.co.uk. You can find out the latest for travel arrangements, particularly if you're thinking of heading out tomorrow to the airport. You might want to take a look at what you can and can't bring and the time scale that you might have to allow there. Right now, though, we're going to take you to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. He's been following today's developments. Even though he's in Jerusalem, we can catch up with him there, trying to make sense of all the conflicting lines that are coming out now, Frank. We know this operation was one that had been going on for months, and yet, of course, it came to a head today. Is there anything that you're reading into the timing of that?
Yes, what I'm being told, Emily, is that one of the things that had a major bearing on the timing for this is a series of arrests made only a few days ago in Pakistan, in the port city of Karachi. And there were a number of suspected extremists who were arrested there, who I'm told are linked with this plot. So Pakistan, Britain and the US all had this whole plot under some kind of surveillance for quite a long time. I'm told that it went back even as far as a year, and there does seem to have been intense cooperation between the counter-terrorism authorities of all three countries.
Certainly, that's what we've been hearing from Pakistan. They've been very keen to let the world know what an important role they have played. Do you know anything more about the links that we've been told could connect the British-born people arrested to Pakistan?
Well, it's known that some of them have visited Pakistan recently. I've put the question to people who would know. Is it true that they went to Al-Qaeda training camps? The answer is not sure, not certain. I think that area of it is still being investigated, probably by the Pakistani authorities. I think one of the clues here, and just sort of stepping back a little bit from the actual people arrested, but just to look at the big picture, one of the clues that Britain was going to be a target of repeated attacks by Al-Qaeda came in the video that was released on the eve of the anniversary of the July bombings that showed Shehzad Tanweer, one of the London bombers, and Ayman al-Zawahiri, the chief strategist of Al-Qaeda. And on that, Emily, if you remember, there was pictures of people kind of mixing some sort of materials, and then there was an explosion, and then there was a big rant from Zawahiri in which he castigated Britain for its role in the Middle East and its historic role, and calling on people to punish it. So I think the clues there were fairly obvious. I mean, Al-Qaeda tends to be quite open about what it wants to do, and I think that quite possibly there was some sort of inspiration from that.
Interesting. The lay observer might have tried to link that to the crisis in Lebanon, but your gut instinct says this has been going on much longer. Let me just take you to some of the reports coming out of the US, Frank. ABC saying that we could still be hunting 5 more suspects in this foiled terror plot. Now, clearly, with Britain on this critical level of security, the sense is that they haven't quite finished the job yet. But what is your sense of that?
Well, what I'm being told is that they've got all the major players who they believe were involved in this plot, the actual sort of the A-team, as it were, the hit team. There are other people on the periphery who they would probably like to try and get hold of and question. They may not actually find any evidence of them, but given the slip-ups that were made over Mohammed Sadiq Khan a few years ago, that's quite an important thing, because remember, he was on the periphery of another investigation and they let him go, as it were. They didn't follow it up. So it's perfectly possible that there are some people connected to this who are more dangerous than our own security and intelligence services actually believe they are at the moment. So that's an important bit of follow-up.
Frank, thanks for that.
Well, let's pick up on some of this with terrorism analyst Mike Yardley, who joins us now from Chelmsford. A very good evening to you. Just on the notion that there may be more people at risk and they may even be more dangerous than we realise, I mean, what do you make of that?
Could I just interject first? Frank Gardner had some very interesting things to say there. I think clearly an operation of this scale, if another spectacular was intended as suggested, would have been months, probably a year or so in the planning. So it probably does not relate immediately to events in the Middle East. It takes a lot of background work to bring off something on this scale, as we saw with regard to 9/11.
And in terms of people still at large, I mean, 5 or so, I mean, I suppose it's inevitable there will always be more people that the intelligence services would like to speak to after an operation like this. So what do you read into that?
Well, it's interesting that government spokesmen have been so positive in saying they think they've got the main players. I think that is significant. But as you say quite correctly, there must be people who are on the edges of this operation who are not yet in custody and who may never be put into custody. I think the thing that we can say here is this does appear, as presented anyway, as a major victory for the intelligence services. And of course, since 9/11, we have seen a new focus on human intelligence gathering, penetrating organizations, and also, of course, debriefing a lot of people that we now have in custody, which is vastly improving the general intelligence picture.
Not only was the scale of this unprecedented, assuming that this leads to convictions, but so too is the number of British-born nationals who were involved. I mean, one report from the other side of the Atlantic is that all 21 are British-born. I mean, that's quite alarming.
Well, that is a little worrying. And yet I think that we all know that there have been people living in the UK who are sympathetic to the Islamic radical cause and who have, to a degree, been inspired by it. And, you know, that is a fact of modern life, I'm afraid, that a significant number of Islamic radical terrorists have operated in the UK.
The methods which are alleged to have been used here, taking liquid on and getting some sort of device to detonate that to simply blow a hole in the fuselage, which in other words doesn't involve sophisticated training like September the 11th. I mean, what is your interpretation of that? Is it actually a clever, sophisticated operation, or is it slightly opportunistic where they've just sort of found a weak link and they have modern materials you can presumably gather with the help of the internet? I mean, what do you make of it?
I don't think we should underestimate how clever the people are behind the terrorists. For example, Islamic radicals have been experimenting with liquid explosives for more than a decade. I mean, you go back to Ramzi Youssef, one of the masterminds of the World Trade Center bombing, and he was involved with a plot based in the Philippines to bring down aircraft using nitroglycerin with a converted digital watch as the detonator. Now, in the intervening 10 years or more, terrorists are trying to create systems that can defeat, in particular, airport security and electronic scanning. And these so-called binary explosives, that is explosives where you might bring 2 liquids together or a liquid and some other compound that appear relatively innocuous and would go through scanning systems, but then 2 terrorists, one with each component, would bring them together on board the aircraft. That would indicate quite a sophisticated degree of experimentation and planning. So although it may be true that some of the terrorists are quite opportunistic, I don't think in this particular case, if the facts are as they've been presented to us, that's necessarily the case.
Mike Yardley, thank you very much.
Bringing up to date now with the developments on that main story tonight, just after 10 to 9. Police are saying they've disrupted a massive terrorist attack on the transatlantic flights. Scotland Yard says it would have resulted in mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
And the number of people arrested by Scotland Yard has now risen to 24. That's in London, in Buckinghamshire and Birmingham. US television is claiming that 5 more suspects are still being sought.
As you can imagine, the turmoil at the airports today. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled. Hand luggage has been banned.
Now, as you might expect, the markets have been affected considerably by what's been going on today. Let's get all of that now with Julia. Hello, Julia.
Yeah, thanks very much. Business is counting the cost, and certainly we've seen that today's terror threat. Advisors Grant Thornton have said that the total cost of disruption could actually reach around £10 million a day. The world's financial markets also took a bit of a hit this morning. £2 billion wiped off the value of the FTSE 100. It did pick back up in afternoon trade, but the alert did spark a massive sell-off in shares, particularly in the airlines, the travel firms and also hotel companies. Well, Maurice Fitzpatrick is from Grant Thornton. He's with me now. The cost that you've actually anticipated, Maurice, is very much just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's right. What we looked at was the issue of business air travellers, people using air travel about their normal business. And we calculated that the cost of business air travellers being delayed today disrupted, delayed, maybe having to make alternative arrangements, would probably come to about £10 million, taking the day as a whole.
So that's really just looking at those who were perhaps caught up in the situation, as opposed to those companies that are actually really involved in it, the airlines themselves, the airports themselves, the travel companies. So if you added that on, are you thinking that this could end up being a much bigger hit, should we say, to the business world?
Yes, I think our basic exercise was, as you say, fairly limited in its scope, and obviously this is a moving situation. It's only started today. Obviously we'll have to have another look at the figure tomorrow and see how things are evolving. But for example, if the disruption got worse and you began to have an impact on tourism, for example, as a result perhaps of inward flights being cancelled or disrupted, then clearly the potential impact on the UK economy is more considerable. But for today we've just looked at the impact on the business air traveller.
Do you actually think it will have an impact on the economy, or do you think at this stage it may not?
Well, in terms of the UK economy as a whole, which produces about £5 billion a day, then obviously the sorts of figures we're talking about are fairly limited, and let's hope the disruption gradually subsides and everything gets back to normal. But we'll have to keep it under review.
Maurice, thank you very much for crunching some of those numbers today. It's a good job that that was all we were doing today. That's the business news this hour. We will be back in the next hour with lots more.
Julia, thanks very much. We've been giving Dan far too much airtime today for sport, but here's a little bit more, Dan. Don't get too carried away.
Yes, I'll grab these few minutes. John Terry has been appointed as the new captain of the England football team.